continue being non-nuclear states. So the real threat at the moment is, as one side of the equation goes missing, it is quite likely that the other will also start fracturing. A number of things that have happened in recent years, unfortunately, have been sending extremely dangerous signals. We know that North Korea has essentially become untouchable as a consequence of its nuclear program. And this has seen a debate bubbling away in South Korea about what it should be doing.
There are also questions over the reliability of the US as an ally. Then over in the Middle East, negotiations last year between the US and Iran to prevent it developing nuclear weapons were interrupted when Israel attacked nuclear and military sites in Iran. And the US military joined that campaign with airstrikes on Iranian nuclear facilities.
And so the trust in nuclear diplomacy was basically shattered. And then, of course, Russia's nuclear threats at various points in time in the context of the Ukraine war, and the lesson that many countries around the world have been drawing from this is all you need to do, particularly at those points in time in which it looks you're losing a conventional war, is go ahead with a nuclear threat. And your adversaries, in this case the West, will be very, very scared and will be pulling back. I'm not saying that we should take nuclear threats lightly. All I am saying is that the message that this sends around the world is you're kind of safer if you actually do build your nuclear weapons.
In March 2025, Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk said he was talking to France about being protected by its nuclear arsenal to shore up security against any threats from Russia. So with trust diminished and transparency disappearing, all that's left is restraint.
Deep down, everyone knows, and probably everyone still subscribes to the fact that nuclear wars cannot be won and therefore should not be fought. I think what we also should latch onto is the fact that, at least in principle, all those countries subscribing to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty want to continue subscribing to this. Coming back to the US and Russia, we're not in a situation in which Washington and Moscow essentially say this is unimportant and we don't even want to think about it. You know, they do. And the question is what can be done in order to push them further in this direction.
So back to our main question. Is nuclear disarmament set to self-destruct? The disappearance of the New START treaty marks the end of the US and Russia's legally binding cooperation on nuclear arms control, including inspection and verification. Some nuclear states will be unpredictable regardless of whether they have or haven't signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Ongoing conflicts and doubts over the reliability of allies is also prompting some countries to reconsider their non-nuclear policies. Last word to our expert witness, Alexandra Bell.
We really find ourselves at an inflection point, and the choices that will be made in the months and years ahead are going to determine whether we continue to reduce nuclear threats or we simply replay the dangerous process we went through in the Cold War, and we may not get so lucky this time.
This episode of The Inquiry was written and presented by me, Charmaine Cozier. The producer was Jill Collins, researcher Evie Yabsley, editor Tom Bigwood, and technical producer Richard Hannaford.
That was The Inquiry from the BBC. I'm Saroja Coelho here.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello there, Winnipeg. It is in Winnipeg right now, lightly snowing. It's minus 15, and you're listening to Information Radio. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on that app and on YouTube. Today, blowing snow is probably the biggest thing in the forecast. 60% chance of more flurries in Winnipeg, a high minus 14. Brandon, your temperature is going to drop. Good morning to you if you're listening from that part of the province in Westman. Your temperature will fall to minus 18 this afternoon. Currently, you are sitting right around minus 16, so not much movement. And in Thompson today, we have a mix of sun and cloud expected for your city and winds north 20 to 40, chance of flurries, and your temp will fall to minus 31 this afternoon. You're starting the day right around well, minus 29. So that's not going to be much of a change for you. Just cold across the province. We have warnings for snow, blowing snow, and cold. So January continues. Don't you know? We're on air with the morning show till 8:37. If you want to call us, you're calling Corey on the commute to let us know what it's like out there. 788-3093. Corey Funk directs the show as well. Good morning to Mr. Abby Adiyemi, covering our weather forecast on the air for the rest of the show. And Abby's our senior tech. And good morning to Mr. Darren Mirage, our producer of our YouTube stream, if you're watching the show live there. And if you are, you're about to see Heather Wells come up from our CBC Manitoba News Centre to start us off with our headlines for Wednesday, January 21st. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, Manitoba is returning to the private nursing agencies it cut loose just days ago. The province is temporarily allowing some healthcare facilities to once again ask the private agencies for help filling nursing shifts. It was just last week Manitoba cut ties with dozens of agencies. The PC health critic says this transition could have been a lot smoother. We're going to hear from her coming up. And a prominent physician who worked to improve health outcomes for Indigenous people has died. Dr. Barry Lavali is being remembered for his work not only as a physician, but also as an advocate. We'll hear more about his life in our next local news at 6:30.
All right, quite a loss. He's been on our program many times making sense of things. Yeah. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Let's get into what else is coming up today. In addition to those stories, today the city might be saying bye-bye birdie. City officials are proposing to take back a bird-friendly window requirement for new developments that they just proposed last year. We'll talk about that. And we're also going to get the latest on the state of smoking across this country. Stay with us.
On Q.
I'm Talia Schlanger in for Tom Power. Jodie Foster, the Oscar and Emmy-winning actor, is doing something she's never done before, taking on the lead role in a French-language film. Jodie will tell you why she feels like she has a different personality as an actor in French and about the freedom she's found after turning 60.
Suddenly was like, yeah, who cares? I didn't have to be the center of attention anymore.
Q, this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on CBC Listen, or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. The world is waiting to hear from U.S. President Donald Trump. He will address the World Economic Forum today in Davos, Switzerland. But Trump's threats to Greenland are angering European leaders. The European Parliament is now reconsidering a U.S. trade agreement. The deal was reached last July, but it still needs approval. The CBC's Crystal Gomansing has more.
I would tell everyone, take a deep breath.
Advice from Scott Bessent, the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury, on what arguably could be the biggest day in Davos.
Do not have this reflexive anger that we've seen and the bitterness. Why don't they sit down, wait for President Trump to get here and listen to his argument? Because I think they're going to be persuaded.
But Europeans are angry. President Trump's persistent statements that he'll acquire Greenland from a fellow NATO member one way or another is forcing European leaders to change how they operate. Ursula von der Leyen is the European Commission president.
We now live in a world defined by raw power, whether economic or military, technological or geopolitical. And while many of us may not like it, we must deal with the world as it is now.
The UK is one of the 8 nations poised to be hit with Trump's new tariffs next month. MP Ed Miliband says the UK is sticking with a measured approach.
We seek to find common ground. We seek to bridge the divides.
Others, like Jürgen Hart, Germany's foreign policy spokesperson for the coalition government, says Europeans and their allies have power when they work together.
I think our cards are not so bad.
Leaders say it should be about cooperation with America, not capitulation. Crystal Gomansing, CBC News, London.
Canada's Governor-General says this country's support for Greenlanders is very strong, and it is up to them to determine their future. Mary Simon spoke with CBC News from the embassy in Mexico City. She's meeting with the president of Mexico to advance bilateral trade with Canada. Simon says Canadian and Greenlandic Inuit share a common goal.
As Inuit of Canada, we are very self-determining people, and we've negotiated agreements with different governments to advance that. And I think that my own personal feelings are that the Greenlanders have that right as well. Every people has the right to determine how they want to be.
The Governor General says the people of Greenland are nervous about U.S. President Donald Trump's threats of annexation, and they do not want their relationship with Denmark to end. Trump is also still promising to block all Venezuelan money and oil that was going to Cuba, and he's predicting the communist country will fall. The CBC's Lorenda Redekop has more on how some Cubans in Canada are reacting.
Hopefully, Cuba will be free this year.
Nelson Taylor Saul supports Donald Trump's comments about Cuba. He's a Cuban Canadian who's long called for changes there, refusing to visit the country for more than 20 years. Julio Fonseca has a much different view. He's been watching and worrying, given Trump's statements.
It is really dangerous, and the world should stand up and say enough is enough.
This was the U.S. president speaking to reporters 2 weeks ago.
Cuba is ready to fall.
The Americans, of course, have believed that they're about to fall and collapse into the ocean many, many times since 1959.
Mark Entwistle is with the Munk School of Global Affairs and a former Canadian ambassador to Cuba. He says despite decades of U.S. sanctions, it has survived, though he says it is increasingly difficult there with an economic downturn going back to the start of COVID. But he says the country has become less reliant on Venezuelan oil over the years.
My recommendation to policymakers in Washington is assume nothing. Don't count them down, even though they're on the mat.
All this in a country where legions of Canadians spend their vacations and make up the highest number of tourists. Recently, Ottawa issued a travel advisory warning about power outages and shortages of basic necessities. It's too early to know if this will affect tourism, the island's biggest industry. Lorenda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
Sweden is taking a stand against the U.S. president's so-called Board of Peace. Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson told reporters this morning Sweden will not participate. Trump says the board will oversee next steps in Gaza and he will be the chair. The proposal was initially criticized by the office of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Some of his far-right allies say Israel should take a sole responsibility for Gaza's future. But Netanyahu now says he's willing to join the Board of Peace. The man who killed Japan's former prime minister has been sentenced to life behind bars. He shot Shinzo Abe in 2022 during a speech. The killer says it was revenge for Abe's perceived political ties to a controversial church. But as the CBC's Malone Mullen reports, despite his guilty plea, some see the killer as a victim.
These supporters of the man who shot Shinzo Abe to death say life in prison is too harsh a sentence, protesting outside the courtroom as Tetsuya Yamagami learned his fate. Nearly 700 people lined up for a ticket to the killer's sentencing. In spite of the late prime minister's popularity, empathy for Yamagami persists. Some observers told CBC News they hoped the judge would go easy on the killer. This woman hopes he'll be rehabilitated. Others here say Yamagami's crime was a reaction to an imbalance of power.
An instance of what I would call counter-hegemonic violence from below.
Canadian Setsu Shigematsu is a professor at the University of California. She studies political revolt and wanted a front row seat to the trial.
When we really get to the root of what causes this kind of violence against authority, there are a lot of legitimate moral reasons why people act this way. And
Abe led Japan for over 8 years. His killer testified that he targeted Abe because he believed the politician had ties to the Unification Church, a South Korean religious group known for its outsized political influence. Yamagami says the church preyed on his mother, demanding she donate the family's savings, leaving them destitute. A Japanese court dissolved the church last year. Malone Mullen, CBC News, Nara, Japan.
Spanish authorities say there has been a second fatal train crash this week, this time in the Barcelona area. One person was killed last night. The train plowed into a retaining wall that had fallen onto the tracks. More than 30 other people have been injured. Commuter train service in the area is suspended. This crash happened while Spain is in 3 days of mourning. On Sunday, a high-speed collision in the south of Spain killed more than 40 people. The spouse of the deadliest mass shooter in Canadian history is sharing her story. The gunman disguised himself as an RCMP officer and went on a rampage in Nova Scotia. As the CBC's Kayla Hounsell reports, now 6 years later, she's revealing more about how she lived with intimate partner violence.
Things that happen behind closed doors need to be told.
For 19 years, Lisa Banfield stayed silent about life with the man who would become the worst mass shooter in modern Canadian history. Not anymore. She says for much of their time together, Gabriel Wortman abused her.
And Gabriel threatened my family, so I couldn't leave.
In April 2020, Wortman went on a rampage, masquerading as an RCMP officer with a replica police car, killing 22 people, including a pregnant woman. It began with an attack on Banfield. Now she's telling her story of intimate partner violence in a book and to the Current's Matt Galloway. But the families of those murdered are still grieving, and many are angry about Banfield's book.
It's brought on a lot of trauma.
Tammy Oliver McCurdy lost her sister, Jolene Oliver, brother-in-law, Aaron Tuck, and 17-year-old niece, Emily.
It's about that she's making money off the backs of our deceased family members.
The RCMP originally charged Banfield with providing ammunition. The charge was withdrawn after she completed a restorative justice program. The public inquiry examining the mass shooting was clear. Banfield is a victim and was re-victimized by the RCMP.
People are going to say whatever they want about me, but if I could help one person, I can take that.
Banfield says she lives with survivor's guilt and is still in therapy, but also finding her voice. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Halifax.
You can hear the complete interview with Lisa Banfield this morning at 8:37 on The Current. That is the latest national and international news from World Report. For news anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, everyone. Well, blowing snow is probably the story of the day. It's going to be not so cold in parts of the province and then really frigid in others. Still January. Don't you know? Imagine that. January 21st. Thanks for joining us for the morning show. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube, wherever you're finding us. Thanks for being here. Let's get into this hour on the program. We're going to talk about what's going on with something that was just introduced a year ago. City officials are now proposing to take back a bird-friendly window requirement for new developments. So why are they pulling back on this? We'll find out more. In addition, can you guess how many Canadians still use tobacco? How about here in Manitoba? We're going to look at those rates right now. It is National Non-Smoking Week, so we're going to dig into what needs to be done and where the problems still lie. They have a goal to reduce smoking across the country to 5% by 2035. That is the Canadian Cancer Society, so we're going to talk to them. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells, who has other local headlines this morning. Hi, Heather.
Hi there. Good morning. Well, as temperatures drop into the low -20s this week, people who live and work in a 3-story complex in Wolseley are preparing for more discomfort. That building at 875 Westminster has been without proper heat since early January. Raina Enns lives there. She says she's fed up. She started staying in a hotel, and she says it feels like the property managers don't realize they're human. Manitoba is going back to the private nursing agencies it dropped just days ago, asking them for help. The province is now allowing some healthcare facilities to ask the agencies for help filling shifts. The health minister says it's being done to ensure patient safety. We're going to hear more coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather. Let's get into what's going on in this weather forecast. I mentioned the blowing snow. Abby, what else is going on today? And good morning, by the way.
Good morning, Marcy. We are looking at a day of, lots of activities happening across board. We have this cold front that's going to be bringing blizzard conditions to parts of southern Manitoba. And even we're looking at extreme cold in the northern part of the province. For the southern part of the province, we have this yellow blowing snow advisory for today as this cold front surges through the region region, expect the winds to come from the northwest. It's going to be gusting all the way to 80 kilometers per hour, creating near zero visibilities, and this will be impacting most regions in the Lake Manitoba area and through the Red River, even into the Pembina Valley region. Travel will be difficult when this snowy whiteout conditions begin to whip around. And up north, we're looking at orange extreme cold warning in effect for Brochet and Tuduli Lake and even surrounding areas. We're looking at it's more like a dangerous 3-day stretch with wind chills getting between minus 45 Mercy, and some areas from tonight in that part of the province would see wind chills in the values of minus 50, which means frostbites in minutes. So you need to take it easy. For Winnipeg right now, minus 14. Light snow temperatures will hover near minus 14 and minus 17 all morning. Our high is expected to just stay around minus 14. Good chance of flurries, gust and northwest winds. Temperatures drop, and then we'll see wind chills near minus 32 this afternoon. Frostbite also in minutes, so you need to take it easy. For regions around Brandon and even into the Interlake, we're seeing temperatures hover between minus 19 and minus 12 at this time. And up north, we're looking at the brutal stats. Some regions already clocking minus 27 this morning, while we're seeing minus 31 in some areas. And we're expecting that wind chill to hit minus 50 later tonight around Tuduli Lake. So it's more like a frigid night ahead for most of the regions. Winnipeg right now, minus 14, light snow outside, expected to stay steady around this digit for most of the day.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Corey, I get snotty at this time of year.
Oh, yeah.
Do you know that? Like, I get winter snotty. I was watching Toronto, and they were having a weather report, and they were talking about how there was snow, but then it didn't melt because they stayed cold, and then it was blowing. And what do you do with blowing snow? And I was all Manitoba snobby. I was watching my TV going, come on, what do you do with blowing snow?
Yeah. Oh, no, poor Toronto. Yeah, I think everyone collectively does that
And
here.
then you have a minute where you feel bad because you know people in Toronto, and they're not used to it and all that stuff.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
that little moment is sometimes what gets us through days like this where it's really cold.
Exactly. We're a hardy people.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So what's going on in the commute?
Yeah. It's so far, haven't heard of any major issues in the city right now. I was looking at Manitoba 501. It looks like Highway 7. So that's right north of the city. Takes you north kind of to Fernwood there. Covered conditions, poor visibility. Also the highways around Stonewall as well. So just careful if you're hitting the highways there. Might not be ideal. That looks like the worst highways right now. But if you do see something going on and you want to tell me about it, you can call our CBC commuter line. If you're walking, you're biking, you're driving, would love to hear from you. That number, 204-788-3093.
6:16 is the time right now. Well, Winnipeg is not a bird-friendly city, according to Nature Canada, a national nature conservation charity. And it could take a turn for the worse because today a public hearing is going to weigh in on proposed changes to new building requirements that just came in like a year ago, this proposal. This is near malls and corridors. Now, one of the proposed changes was to get rid of mandatory bird-friendly windows. So Larry McInnes is the executive director of the Urban Development Institute of Manitoba. Here's what he had to say.
What we have heard from some of the suppliers is the floors that would require that type of window glazing or treatment, it can as much as double the price of the window. And sourcing those types of windows or the treatments that were prescribed in the original requirements can be problematic for builders and developers in Manitoba. There's not really a local supplier of those like there is for most other types of windows.
So the bird-safe window requirements, as I alluded to, came into effect January 2025, but now they've pulled it back. It's on the chopping block. Over 600 Manitobans have sent emails to the city asking lawmakers to keep this. One of them is in studio, Shelby Bone. She's the co-founder of Bird Friendly Winnipeg. Good morning.
Good morning.
So how dangerous are windows to wild birds?
They're one of the top 5 reasons why birds in Canada are dying, and it hurts so much more because these deaths are totally preventable.
Why do you care about this? Tell me a little bit about what's prompted you to be part of this movement.
Yeah, I'm a biologist who actually was just lucky enough to move back to Winnipeg. I've been away from home for over a decade for school, And during that time, I was learning about all of the ways that individuals and animals are connected to each other. I'm an ecologist, which is the study of an individual within its environment, which is kind of relatable as we are people moving about our environment. And during that time, I was going in and out of the science building, doing my scientific research. And one morning I found a dead bird, and it was actually the first time I'd ever seen this type of bird. I didn't even know what it was. I brought it in to an ornithologist and said, "Isn't this so sad?" And they explained to me like what had happened. And it was so surreal that it was happening in the building where the researchers were studying the birds and how to protect them. And so we started to advocate a little bit more. And then this was right around the same time that the Bird Friendly Cities program was getting up and running. So it kind of steamrolled from there, but it really did kind of start with one bird for me.
How interesting. What a story that is. So you said that this is, it's also sad because it's preventable. How does a window become bird safe?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the analogy I use a lot of times is like, we all have this memory of like a kid running into a sliding door, and it's really no different for birds, except that it's happening at high speeds. It's like driving along the highway and there's an immovable sliding door. And so a lot of these collisions are fatal because they just either don't see the glass, they think they can fly right through, or because it's reflective and it reflects the habitat right back to them. So sort of like a restaurant makes it look bigger with mirrors. The environment can sometimes look bigger than it actually is.
You heard what Lanny said there about the additional cost of these requirements. What's your response to that?
My response at the end of all of those statements was yet. There's not a manufacturer in Winnipeg yet. There's not. It's hard. It's still hard to find right now until. That's because these regulations are quite new. There's no market yet for them. But there have been a number of high-profile projects that have just gotten off the ground. Fort White, all of their windows are bird-friendly. Ducks Unlimited recently underwent a project. Like, it's possible. It just has to be a priority. One of the things that I think of a lot is that the bird-proofing reminds me a lot about whenever a new safety procedure is implemented. And when seatbelts were first introduced, Henry Ford Jr. really didn't like the idea. He said that it was technically infeasible to include some of these safety regulations. And now Ford is a leader in safety, but they threatened to close down if they couldn't meet those guidelines. And so this idea that it's a barrier to development is right now if we don't demonstrate market value and demand for it, and Winnipeggers have.
What about the expense? I mean, if he's talking about the fact that these could be like close to double what they planned, like that it's a significant expense. I don't have context for like how much it would cost to glaze. Like I'm looking at my window, it's like, what is our CBC studio window? Like 6.5 feet tall and maybe like about 8 feet wide. Like I have no idea how much these things cost.
No, I know. And I'm not a window manufacturer either. So this, I defer to the quotes and the actual quotes from the manufacturers and the installers that are saying what those prices might be. But FLAP, which is an organization, the Fatal Light Awareness Program in Toronto, has also released data on these prices and what the general markup or increase to a project is. And I think what's really important to consider are a couple of things. The first is that it's not the whole budget. So when we're talking about like doubling costs, it's not doubling the cost of the project. It's an increase to the window itself, but this is a small piece of the budget. And when we are faced with budget crunches, I don't know, like personally, you or me, if one thing becomes expensive, but we deem it important enough, other things change. There's flexibility within the rest of the budget. It just
get a
has
less
to
fancy
be...
faucet, save the birds.
Totally.
Change the windows, make choices.
It just has to be valued.
Is your example. How are you feeling then about the city possibly backtracking on this requirement for new developments? I mean, I can guess how you're going to answer, but I mean, what are you planning to, I guess, fight this further?
Well, like individually, just a little bit sad. I was really proud of my home province and my home city to have this bird-friendly policy in place even before there was a bird-friendly organization championing it. They just did it, and I was so proud. And then to hear that after pushback from developers, they're thinking of pulling it back. It's kind of disappointing at first, and then it's time to jump into action. And a lot of Winnipeggers have, over 600 of them have said, no, we need to keep these. So yeah, my initial reaction was disappointment, but now we're getting to work.
And Shelby, what's the big picture before you go? I mean, how could a decrease in the bird population actually affect our province, the people, but the environment as well, given your background?
Yeah, even if you're listening to this and you're not an ornithologist, you don't really know what the individual birds' names are, that's okay. Everyone has seen a bird once, and imagine how surreal it would be if they weren't there. The psychological toll that it would take to lose the amount of birds that we do every year in Canada alone, 16 to 42 million, is totally bizarre and horrifying to think about. And even if this isn't a hobby or an interest, we have a psychological connection to birds. They have been around longer on Earth than people have. Every human being, from the first human being, has a memory of a bird because they were here at the same time. And we are all interconnected, and even if we think we aren't, that doesn't change. So.
Thank you very much for being in studio this morning. Always a special star for the early bird guest, pardon that pun, and we'll see what happens with this.
Thank you.
That is Shelby Bone. She's co-founder of Bird Friendly Winnipeg. So the public hearing is coming up on these proposed changes, by the way. We also have the mayor here in the next hour, sitting right where Shelby is, so we'll have to ask him about this. But that hearing, including the removal of the bird-safe window requirement that they just proposed a year ago, is going to happen at Winnipeg City Hall. It is today, and it is at 9:30 this morning.
Newfoundland was vexed by Verbo. Moose Jaw turned the tables on Skip the Dishes.
To sign a petition to make John Hamm a new Canadian citizen.
And a tech company clocked Coldplay Gate.
I'm Gwyneth Paltrow. I've been hired on a very temporary basis.
Clapback advertising on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland. And on demand on CBC Listen.
6:24 a.m. And although use has gone down, tobacco remains the leading preventable cause of disease and death in Canada. And I mentioned it's National Non-Smoking Week. So the Canadian Cancer Society has a goal to take tobacco use below 5% by 2035. To get there, or tell us how they plan to get there, Heather Mulligan is with us. She's Senior Manager of Advocacy and Strategic Initiatives with the Canadian Cancer Society. Good morning.
Good morning.
So how has tobacco use in Canada changed over time? Because a lot of people hear your goal of 5% and they don't have context for where we're at now.
Well, when you consider in 1965, about 50% of Canadians smoked. Today, smoking prevalence is about 11%. So that just is demonstrating the power of strong tobacco control policies, but also empowering Canadians to quit.
And what about Manitoba? Where are we at here, and what can we do to get to that 5%?
Well, right now, Manitoba has a smoking prevalence of 11%. And I think it's also important to remember that tobacco also remains a leading cause preventable disease and death in the province, tragically taking nearly 1,500 people and costing taxpayers nearly $196 million in direct healthcare costs each year. And so, that is driven by cancer treatment, hospitalizations, lung and heart disease, and more. And so, the tobacco is not a solved issue. It remains one of the biggest drivers of avoidable illness and death, and requires deliberate action.
What do you know about the younger generation in terms of rates of smoking?
Yeah, what we know is youth vaping rates have risen dramatically, with 27% of grade 12 students vaping, compared to 9% less than a decade ago. Nicotine in all its forms is highly addictive, and youth are uniquely vulnerable because nicotine can harm brain development and increase likelihood of long-term dependence. And a growing number of young people are also vaping who've never smoked a cigarette, which is raising serious concerns about creating a new generation addicted to nicotine. And so youth vaping threatens to undo decades of progress that we've seen in tobacco. And so in order for us to achieve 5 by 35, we need a comprehensive strategy. Preventing addiction before it starts is far more effective and far less costly than treating disease later.
I'll ask you about that strategy in a second, but I just want to lean into, you talked about vaping. So is that included in the stats you cited?
So the smoking prevalence rate is just for tobacco use.
Okay. So let's talk about those strategies. How do you see us getting there?
So what we need to first do is help people who are already smoke quit by making those proven cessation supports more accessible. We're seeing provinces like British Columbia and Prince Edward Island, so a big province like BC, small province like PEI, take bold steps in that regard. And they've eliminated completely the costs of quitting by offering universal cessation, meaning if you need an NRT, so nicotine replacement therapy, if you need a prescription, that's provided to you at no cost. Plus, on top of that, all the supports and services to support you on your quit journey. But also, we need to, in connection to that, also prevent the next generation of Canadians from even starting, especially given that rapid rise in vaping. We're seeing, bold moves like increasing the purchase age to 21 years of age as a way of, delaying onset. More curriculum embedding work in schools and supporting young people where they're at. And third, we need strong regulation and enforcement, which historically has driven declines in smoking. Things like restricting flavors that appeal to youth, closing loopholes on online sales, reducing availability and appeal of these nicotine products. All of these working together and funded, properly funded, we can see progress accelerate. And so in Manitoba, we know that the province received its first payout from the tobacco lawsuits. A first and once in a generation opportunity. It's going to be receiving $1.1 billion over the next 20 to 40 years through those lawsuits. We can earmark and direct those funds to where it'll have the greatest yield, bringing down these rates, supporting young people, giving people the tools that they need to be successful, but more importantly, reducing future healthcare costs to Manitoba taxpayers.
And before you go this morning, if someone's listening and they're thinking about giving up tobacco, what help is already out there that you'd like to highlight for folks?
There's a variety of supports and services that are available to those who want to quit. There's a 1-800 number. It's 1-866-366-3667. It's a toll-free line. You can talk to a quick coach and they'll put you in the right supports and services in Manitoba. But also, if you have primary care, or if you go online, there are a variety of quit supports and coaches that are available to any Manitoban who wants to start that journey.
All right, Heather, thank you very much for being with us this morning.
Oh, thank you.
Heather Mulligan is Senior Manager of Advocacy and Strategic Initiatives with the Canadian Cancer Society. Good morning, everyone. It is cold again today, Wednesday, January 21st, minus 14 in Winnipeg. Light snow falling. Winds are calm, though. But it is going to be really cold in parts of the province, so especially up north. And the next few days just get colder. We have business news coming up with Crystalie Ramlakan. She's going to talk about U.S. President Donald Trump threatening 8 European countries with new tariffs. We're going to find out how markets are reacting after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. It's 6:30. It's pleasant now, but wait for it. We are going to get cold, quite cold tonight. But for today, blowing snow as that wind picks up, a good chance of flurries and a high of minus 14. A man who was convicted and later acquitted in a high-profile Winnipeg murder case is facing new charges in Vancouver. British Columbia's prosecution service says Mark Edward Grant has been charged with unlawful confinement, sexual assault with a weapon, and uttering threats. He was previously convicted in the 1984 murder of 13-year-old Candace Dirkson in 2011, but Grant was later acquitted of the crime. Candace's mother, Wilma Dirkson, says she found out about Grant's new charges yesterday, just days after the anniversary of her daughter's death, and that stirred up a painful mix of emotions.
I guess living it a bit again and feeling the pain of the victim and the parents of the victim and the family of the victim.
Dirkson hopes the alleged victim in Vancouver receives an outpouring of support. Grant is expected to appear in a BC court later this month for a possible bail hearing. A Wolseley area grocery store worries their business may have to pause if heat isn't soon restored to their building. The 3-story complex at 875 Westminster Avenue has been without proper heat since early January. Brendan Enns at the Organic Planet Workery Co-op says the cold temperatures are making it hard to work.
We're pretty worried about the produce. We're worried about our things like our fridges tend to shut down and stop working if it gets cold enough in here.
Thorwin Properties says in a statement the boiler had to be shut off because of carbon monoxide levels. The company says it is working on permanent repairs and in the meantime has provided tenants with heaters. A prominent physician who worked to improve health outcomes for Indigenous people has died. Dr. Barry Lavali is being remembered for his work not only as a physician, but also as an advocate. In a statement, Kiwetanuk Inanu Minuyawan says Lavali died unexpectedly. The 64-year-old had been CEO there since 2020. The organization supports healthcare in Northern First Nations. Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs Grand Chief Kyra Wilson says Lavali worked to end disparities between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people.
It's passion that really makes a strong advocate, and he was very passionate about our people and health when it comes to First Nations.
Lavali often spoke of issues surrounding racism in healthcare. He was part of the Brian Sinclair Working Group. Sinclair was a First Nations man who died in a Winnipeg emergency room while waiting for care. Manitoba's returning to the private nursing agencies it cut loose just days ago. The province is temporarily allowing some healthcare facilities to once again ask these agencies for help filling nursing shifts. Just last week, Manitoba cut ties with dozens of agencies. It's trying to make private nursing less appealing and push more staff to the public system. PC health critic Kathleen Cook says the transition could have been smoother had the province reduced the number of private agencies gradually.
They could have focused on eliminating those vacancies, on filling those vacancies in Prairie Mountain Health before they essentially handcuffed the RHA and took the agency option away from them.
Manitoba's health minister says they are still committed to transitioning from nearly 80 agencies to just 4. Costs have skyrocketed from $26 million a year to $80 million in just 4 years. Stretched beyond the breaking point. That is how one group describes staffing for respiratory therapists at acute care hospitals. The Manitoba Association of Healthcare Professionals says vacancy rates have reached dangerous levels at the Health Sciences Centre, St. Boniface Hospital, and Grace Hospital. It estimates 50 positions are vacant at those 3 hospitals alone, with more vacancies at smaller facilities and programs. Cherie Jagalik is with the Society of Manitoba Respiratory Therapists.
We'll go into work sometimes, and our daily staffing schedule is 11 on days and usually 8 staff on nights. We cover a lot of different areas with our specialties, and sometimes we're down to 6 on days and 4 on nights, so sometimes almost at half staff.
A spokesperson for Health Minister Uzoma Asseguera says the province has doubled the number of funded training seats and is actively recruiting. It says 16 respiratory therapists were hired last year alone. While the Winnipeg Jets treat the hometown crowd to a win.
Shifley steps to the goal. Shifley, Wilson, and scores!
Mark Shifley in the first period on TSN as the Winnipeg Jets beat the Blues 3-1. Shifley would add an empty netter in the third, scoring Winnipeg's other goal, Josh Morrissey, who says in a grueling schedule, they'll take that win.
Grinding, battling through it. It might not be the prettiest night, but finding a way to get those 2 points, which is kind of been what we've been talking about a lot lately. So we did a good job of just sticking with our game.
Next up, the Jets host former coach Paul Maurice and his Florida Panthers tomorrow. You can find the latest news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Heather, my Facebook social feed is just full of people mourning the loss of Barry Lavali, but also just when you think about the loss to our community and then more specifically the loss of leaders, change makers in our Indigenous community. I mean, crazy over the last couple of years. I mean, and sudden losses, right? Kathy Merrick, advocacy, Ian Ross for the arts. And now Barry Lavali, obviously his work in the field of health, and even just previous to that, Marie Sinclair. So, I mean, it's just really been a profound time of shifting change in the province. Very sad.
Some big holes to fill.
Absolutely. And I think that probably a lot of people, I'm just speaking personally here, are very happy that all of the people on that list believed in mentorship. Yes. And passing it along and being part of community in that very real way. So you kind of see such value in that as their legacies are left behind and people carry on their important
all
work.
is not lost.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's get into what's going on in the weather forecast. Abby, you'll like this. I got photos from Peter Harvey just now. I'll try to get them through to our feed in the next hour. Peter was up early this morning. He's in western Manitoba, and he took some beautiful pictures of a clear sky to start the day. 5:40, he shot some snaps at the time, so a couple hours ago, or an hour ago. This is Aurora Borealis. So here in the south, you could see some of the northern lights last night.
Yeah, the solar storm has been pretty active for the last 42 hours.
Yeah.
The whole of yesterday and even the day before, we've been tracking some really, really lovely geomagnetic storm across, the orbits. So it's been beautiful, and I'm sure a lot of people are still going to see that. I got an alert this month, just a few minutes ago, saying if you look up and it's clear, you're going to see it. So definitely, if you still got some dark covering in your area, probably you could check it out and you might just see something above you.
Yeah, Abby's part of that community that the alerts go off and they say, look up.
Look up.
All right, let's, if we look up now, though, things are changing. What's up in the weather?
Yep, if you're looking up, you might want to take into consideration it's cold outside. We have this cold front. It's really an extreme one. It's going to be ushering in dangerous blizzard conditions in a lot of regions down south and also up north. We're looking at life-threatening cold conditions there. We're talking about yellow blowing snow advisory for the southern part of the province, as we'll be seeing wind gusts in the range of 80 kilometers to 90 kilometers. Near zero visibility will be impacting you later in the day. While up north, we're looking at that extreme cold one and still tracking it all the way towards Churchill, Lynn Lake, and Tuduli Lake this morning. Later tonight, we'll see the temperatures really get to about minus 50. So that will be brutal. You need to take it easy and take care of yourself if you're going to be outside in that part of the province today. For Winnipeg right now, we're around minus 14, light snow already falling outside. We're going to see the temperature really stay around this minus 14 for most of the day. Maybe later tonight, we might see minus 24, but for now, we're just going to hover around minus 14, minus 15 in the city. Expect a good chance of flurries and some gusty winds, which will make the wind chill feel like minus 31 in the city. And that would be the condition all day. A risk of frostbite in play. And then later tonight, we'll see the wind chills hit minus 43 for Winnipeg. Similar conditions we're seeing in the Pembina Valley region, minus 12 at this time. Light snow also falling. Wind chill around minus 31. Brandon is at minus 19. You're going to stay there for most of the day. The wind chill feels like minus 30 there. In the Parkland region, Dauphin is sitting at minus 12 at this time. Temperatures fall into minus 18. You see a wind chill around minus 30, while in Gimli, minus 16 at this time. Temperature drops even further to minus 20, but the sharp wind chill feels close to minus 34. Now, in the northern part of the province, the powerful influence surrounding communities, we're looking at light snow, minus 21 at this time, falling to minus 24, wind chill near minus 39, and in Thompson, minus 27, dropping to minus 31, the wind chill close to minus 45. Around Tuduli Lake, we're seeing freezing conditions there, minus 31 at this time, wind chill close to minus 47, while in Churchill, minus 28, and your wind chill feels like minus 39.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
And the commute, Corey, hearing anything?
Yeah, I actually heard from our colleague Megan in the newsroom. She came in. She said northbound Osborne, just before Broadway, she saw that there was a kind of a small 3-car collision. They were exchanging information in the far left lane, northbound Osborne, just before Broadway. Might be clear by now, but as a heads up, you might want to keep right if you're heading that way this morning. Other than that, though, haven't heard of any major issues out there. Careful on the highways just north of Winnipeg, heading towards Stonewall, Highway 7 towards Fernwood. Might be some poor conditions there as well, according to Manitoba 511. Some poor visibility, too. If you do see something else, though, going on, you can give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number, 204-788-3093.
All right, time for business news. Chrisley Ramlikan's here with her report. Good morning.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
So U.S. President Donald Trump threatening 8 European countries with new tariffs. We know all of this. Tensions escalating. He wants to control Greenland. He's speaking in Davos today. I'm wondering how markets are reacting.
Well, stocks posted their biggest drop in months yesterday after all of this news. The S&P 500 saw its biggest decline since October, and Canada's main stock index was also weighed down. And markets in Europe and Asia also fell. So technology stocks were the heaviest weights on the market. Nvidia and Apple both declined, and retailers, banks, and industrial companies also dropped sharply. So Trump's trade policy, have really stirred up these markets. So stocks have sold off on the threat of steep tariffs, and then they rallied when Trump delays or cancels a tariff or negotiates a lower rate. And as you were saying, in his latest move, Trump has threatened a 10% import tax starting next month on goods from Denmark, Norway, Sweden, France, Germany, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, and Finland. So the annual combined imports from the European nations are actually greater than the top two importers into the U.S. right now, Mexico and China. Now, on the other hand, gold and silver prices surged, and that's because those kinds of assets are often considered safe havens in times of geopolitical turmoil.
Let's stay with trade. How are exports doing after Canada announced the deal with China to reduce tariffs last week?
Well, Federal Agriculture Minister Heath MacDonald says China is moving quickly to import Canadian canola and beef. So he says a Chinese importer has ordered 60,000 metric tons of canola seed, and he's aware of a company shipping its first load of Canadian beef to China next week. And it's expected to be the first time China has purchased Canadian canola seed and beef since it imposed measures to block the products. So on Monday, China lifted its ban on Canadian beef imports after an atypical case of BSE, or mad cow disease, was found on an Alberta farm in 2021. So BSE is a fatal brain disease in cattle, and atypical strains pose no health risks to humans. And last week, as we know, Beijing reduced tariffs on canola seed and at least temporarily removed levies on canola meal, lobsters, crabs, and peas. So McDonald says the lifting of the beef ban and the reduction of tariffs helps Canada access more markets to grow its economy. But he says there's more work to be done on Canadian pork, though, which continues to face Chinese tariffs.
And finally, why has Lululemon pulled one of its new workout lines from its website?
Well, this is because the company says it's to help the retailer better understand some initial feedback. So online sales of the Get Low collection have been temporarily paused. Now, Lululemon has not described the nature of the feedback, but customers on social media say the clothing is ill-fitting and too sheer. So some say the leggings are so see-through that people could see their underwear or thigh tattoos. Now, Lululemon says the collection was targeted at people training and was meant to give a seamless, sculpted look in a weightless, fast-drying fabric. But you know what? This is not the first time Lululemon has stopped selling a collection. So in 2024, it paused sales on some leggings after complaints of a whale tail look because of the V-shaped seams on the pants. And it also recalled some of its popular black pants in 2013 because they were too see-through. And Marcy, this comes as the company is still looking for a new CEO. And retail experts say the next leader faces the challenge of attracting customers, currently favoring rivals such as Alo.
All right, Crystalie, thank you.
Thanks, Marcy.
That is Crystalie Ramlakan with our business news. Well, a standing ovation, we understand, is rare at the World Economic Forum, but that is what happened for Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, yesterday when he was speaking. We're going to hear more about what he said. We also are going to get some analysis ahead of today and U.S. President Donald Trump speaking in Davos. In Winnipeg this morning and across Manitoba, we have blowing snow issues. So blowing snow for de Salaberry, Hanover, Woodlands, Portage la Prairie, Winkler, extending through Victoria Beach as well, and over to St. Rose de Lac. So we're talking about visibility that will be challenging. Cold warnings for Boucher into Dooley Lake. We're talking minus 45 with the wind chill. And in the Lakes region, we have a blizzard warning for yellow level, warning level, poor visibility, snow and blowing snow. This is around the Lake Winnipeg North Basin. And then in the South Basin, blowing snow expected there as well, but not quite to the level of blizzard condition. In Winnipeg, currently, we're at minus 14. Well, let's build on a story that we heard in Heather's news this morning at 6:30, and we'll hear more from Heather in our news department throughout the morning on this. Wilma Dirkson is a name that many people in our city got to know many years ago for the saddest of reasons. She lost her daughter, Candace Dirkson. Candace Dirkson was in grade 7. She failed to come home from school. MBCI is where she went, Mennonite Brethren Collegiate Institute. You might know that school in Winnipeg's Elmwood neighborhood. It was 1984. She was November 30th when she went missing. She would be found January 17th in a shed about 500 meters near her home. Now, Mark Edward Grant was acquitted of the murder of the 13-year-old Candace Dirkson in 2011. However, news this morning has prompted us to hear once again from Wilma Dirkson because Mark Edward Grant has been charged with unlawful confinement, sexual assault with a weapon, and assault with a weapon and uttering threats in a high-profile case, in Vancouver. He is facing new charges. So here's a bit more from Winnipeg's Wilma Dirkson.
Huge pain. I don't know, it brought tears to my eyes again because I thought, I went to, of course, Candace was killed around this time too, January 17th. So I was going through that and just thinking that somebody was held like that. I guess living it a bit again and feeling the pain of the victim and the parents of the victim and the family of the victim. And I don't know, I guess a relief that the pieces are falling into place, that he was caught this time, and it looks like the evidence is there. And, we want the truth, but just feeling the love for the victims and the victim family, just knowing what they're going to go through. It's just hard. We've been going through it for 41 years, and it's just hard. It's a hard life. But we've also received a lot of support, and we're just thankful for the police's work and for the support of Winnipeg and all around. It's just been, and that's what I wish for them too, that there'll be a lot of healing in this incident. Another thing that happened was that this month was the month in November I realized that I had really done Candace's biography. This is really weird. And so I thought, well, I'm going to be moving on pretty soon, and it's been 41 years, and yet there are many people who've heard the story. The story is still alive, but they don't know who Candace was. They haven't met Candace. They don't have her memory with them. And so what I did was I wrote it out on my blogging, and I've had good response. And I wrote her biography, just concentrating on her and what happened to her. And so I was right in the middle of it. And so all of this to come forward now again just brought me right back there. Almost in a strange way that it all happened again. So timely.
That is Wilma Dirkson. She was in conversation there, by the way, last night with CBC's Cameron McLean. She's the mother of a 1984 murder victim, 13-year-old Candace Dirkson. Now, we should mention, while she's reacting to Mark Edward Grant in British Columbia, who was acquitted in her daughter's death, British Columbia prosecution says he is facing now new charges there. Those new charges have not been tested in court. He's not had a bail hearing. His next appearance is slated for January 28th.
The fire hose of news from America can feel like a lot these days.
If you're trying to figure out what to make of it all, we got you.
I'm Katie Simpson.
And I'm Paul Hunter. We're correspondents here in Washington.
Working just around the corner from where much of the action is taking place.
2 blocks from the White House.
And that's the name of our new podcast.
For top-notch analysis of U.S. politics from a Canadian perspective, find 2 blocks from the White House on CBC Listen and wherever you get your podcasts.
10-7 the time right now, and next, as we've been talking about, world leaders are meeting this week in Davos, Switzerland for the annual World Economic Forum. And in his speech to those gathered yesterday, what a response to Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, speaking about the end of, quote, rules-based international order.
Over the past 2 decades, a series of crises in finance, health, energy, and geopolitics have laid bare the risks of extreme global integration. But more recently, great powers have begun using economic integration as weapons. Tariffs as leverage, financial infrastructure as coercion, supply chains as vulnerabilities to be exploited. You cannot live within the lie of mutual benefit through integration when integration becomes the source of your subordination.
There were so many moments in this speech and so many turns of phrase and things he said that I think stopped the crowd when you were watching this. It was you could hear a pin drop. Carney did not directly name U.S. President Donald Trump, who will speak today in Davos. Trump was not there yesterday. As I mentioned, today he will speak. He'll have his own opportunity later this morning to address the crowd. Viet Vu's with us early, though, manager of economic research at the DAIS, which is at Toronto Metropolitan University. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy. Who knew Katy Perry appearing with Justin Trudeau wasn't the biggest story out of Davos yesterday?
Right. And aren't we glad it wasn't, given the state of what's going on? What stood out to you from Mark Carney's speech yesterday?
Well, I first note the comfort with which Mark Carney spoke. He is very familiar with the World Economic Forum, or WEF as we call it. I think that is the 30 plus times that he has attended. So this is his people, and that comfort came through. But the content fascinated me more. Often, political leaders give Davos speeches to attract investments, lay out the economic policy, maybe announce a new tax measure. It's meant to be boring to a layperson. Instead, the Prime Minister delivered a eulogy to the old world, laying out not only his vision of Canadian foreign policy in the New World Order, but how other powers like Canada must act. I honestly haven't seen anything like it, and it's rare for a speech at Davos to receive a standing ovation. It's clear that Canada is now treating the US more like an adversary.
I thought it was interesting when he called this moment a rupture, his language. He also talked about not mourning the old systems, like not sort of waiting, like we'll go back to some other kind of normal, and how Canada's trying to position to move forward. He talked about Canada, quote, rapidly diversifying abroad. How far is that going to go to protecting us against those who are using economic integration as quote, weapons?
Well, Canada was able to make up 11 out of $18.5 billion lost in US trade by trading with other partners last year. But getting the rest requires recreating massively complicated supply chains that have existed between the two countries in resources and in manufacturing. The type of supply chain that manufactures entire cars will not be recreated by signing a document across the ocean, even though that does provide relief, let's say, for canola farmers with the new trade deal that is signed in with China. It turns out factories do take a long time to plan and build. So I do think when the PM said middle countries need to stick together, I think it's much more about ensuring alignment when it comes to negotiations with superpowers.
Um, what is going to be key for Canada and the rest of the world, including Europe, when it comes to dealing with the United States now, do you think?
Well, there are two events that I'll be looking to. The first is CUSMA negotiations. The US has already signaled that they would prefer bilateral agreements, one with Canada and one with Mexico. The Prime Minister is signaling that if Mexico and Canada is to get a fair deal, the two countries have to negotiate together as opposed to separately. The second set of events surround global tariff, especially as it concerns our European allies and Greenland. Carney is rejecting approaches taken by a few countries to independently negotiate the US to lower tariff that face them, that the only true path for middle powers is to ensure sovereignty. Is to stand together and reject and negotiate these tariffs together. And we've recently seen that with the about-face the US has done when it comes to Greenland and imposition of additional tariff. Otherwise, it was a fairly risky and aggressive speech that Carney made, and brilliantly so. I'm sure he's also looking for other world leaders' reaction as well.
There was some sensibility of, when how Trump's going to react today. Everybody was going to be leaning to watch, whether or not there is a reaction to anything that was said yesterday. Of obviously Canadians highly interested in that, but also that what would he have to lose either way if he spoke the truth or if he didn't. And obviously his whole speech was about the risk of not speaking out in this time. I want to ask about AI. He did actually talk about Canadian investment in AI. There's tech leaders in attendance in Davos, heads of AI companies. What's their main agenda there? What are they listening for?
You're right, Marcy. All of the hyperscalers are in Davos at the moment, from OpenAI to Anthropics, and they're looking for investment and political support to realize their lofty ambitions when it comes to building out these massive data centers and getting the world to buy in on AI adoption without too much regulation. But in addition to Mark Carney highlighting AI investment in Canada, he also urged middle countries to work together so we're not forced to choose between hegemons and hyperscalers. Those are his words when it comes to AI. That central tension, alongside tension between AI companies with labor leaders and AI critics who are also there over things like sovereignty, governance, technology, and the economy, will be keeping me up. I know Mark Carney met with Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, but it seems like that was the only meeting he had with these AI leaders.
We'll leave it there this morning, Viet. We really appreciate your time. We'll all be leaning in to watch what Donald Trump has to say.
Thank you.
That's Viet Vu, Manager of Economic Research at the DAIS, Toronto Metropolitan University at that location. I watched this whole speech from the Prime Minister yesterday. It really was one of those moments in our world history. If you have not, you can find links and more analysis at cbc.ca. It is 3 minutes to 7 o'clock now. It is lightly snowing in Winnipeg. Still ahead in the next hour of the show. If you're having milk this morning in your coffee, or maybe having a bowl of cereal, your milk's about to change. On our medical column today, we're going to hear why they're adding vitamin D to our milk. So stay tuned. That is a Health Canada requirement. It's new. We'll find out all about it from Dr. Bardwash. Also, it's January. You might be hiding inside to escape the cold, and maybe you're looking around the house going, why do I have all this stuff? I know I've been doing that too. If you have the urge to purge, though, we're going to get some ideas about how you do it responsibly. If you've been stuffing those important financial documents for years, what do you actually need to save and pay attention to? So we're going to start talking about purging in a bit of a series this week. And then the mayor of the city of Winnipeg will be here in studio with us on CBC. We will be talking to him about what is going on in a lot of basics this morning. This is our first regular monthly interview of the year with the mayor for 2026. So we're going to ask about population growth, housing starts, and fewer people riding the bus. Right now, 2 minutes to 7 o'clock. Heather Wells is in with other headlines.
Good morning. Well, as temperatures drop into the low minus 20s this week, people who live and work in a 3-story complex in Wolseley are preparing for even more discomfort. The building at 875 Westminster has been without proper heat since early January. Raina Enns lives there. She says she's fed up and has started staying in a hotel. She says the building's managers seem to forget they're human beings. Manitoba is going back to the private nursing agencies it dropped, asking for help. Only days after cutting ties with dozens of nursing agencies, the province is allowing some healthcare facilities to ask those same agencies for help filling nursing shifts. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
Thanks.
Slippery out there, just like yesterday, especially in your cities and main centers where they've scraped, but they have not yet sanded. Otherwise, traffic this morning is moving well. Exhaust fog, obviously a thing. It's cold. 788-3093 if you need us in the city or on the highway to report something. Call Corey. Light snow falling right now, minus 14. And we're going to have a temperature staying right around there for today. Mainly cloudy. Chance of further flurries this morning and blowing snow in outlying areas. Well, the latest on the international stage coming up in national news as well. World Report is next on CBC. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You're with 89.3 FM. 1 minute to 7. Stick around.
Current. The call coming in at 10:26. By 10:38, fires are reported.
On April 22nd, 2022, Lisa Banfield escaped a violent assault by her partner. He went on to carry out Canada's deadliest mass shooting on that day. Lisa Banfield tells her own story. It's coming up from Halifax on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland. And on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. U.S. President Donald Trump will take the stage in Davos today. Trump is in Switzerland and will address leaders gathered at the World Economic Forum, many of whom have been threatened with tariffs as he pushes ahead with his plan to take over Greenland. Some say they're ready to push back. The CBC's Willie Lowry joins me now from Washington. And Willie, what are we expecting from the president today?
U.S. President Donald Trump arrives in Switzerland as Europe grapples with the possibility of a U.S. takeover of Greenland. Trump has repeatedly said that the U.S. needs the island for national security reasons. When asked by a reporter on Tuesday how far he was willing to go to acquire Greenland, he responded with this.
You'll find out.
He later told reporters on board Air Force One that it's going to be a very interesting Davos. A senior White House official says his speech will also focus on the Board of Peace for Gaza and hemispheric domination, a cornerstone of his national security strategy.
What are we hearing from world leaders?
Concern outrage and a seemingly begrudging realization that Trump's threats are real. There are reports today that the European Parliament is considering suspending its approval of a U.S. trade deal reached last July. The announcement of that suspension is expected today in France. Yesterday, French President Emmanuel Macron said Trump's threats of new tariffs were unacceptable. And today, UK Chancellor Rachel Reeves said Britain would not rule out retaliatory tariffs. In Davos, European leaders are scrambling for FaceTime with Trump, hoping to dissuade him from following through with his threats on Greenland.
Thank you, Willie.
My pleasure.
The CBC's Willie Lowry in Washington. It's not clear how the U.S. president will be received today, especially after Prime Minister Mark Carney's rallying cry to middle powers. He urged them to stand up to hegemony. As Tom Perry reports, the Canadian delegation is getting more questions about that today.
From Prime Minister's speech yesterday, everyone's talking about Canada. And
International Trade Minister Maninder Sidhu says Prime Minister Mark Carney's speech yesterday at the World Economic Forum was a hit, at least with the people he's heard from. Carney told delegates the old rules-based order that governed global affairs and global trade is effectively dead, that middle power countries like Canada and others need to join together to defend themselves against more powerful players seeking to subordinate them. Carney never mentioned U.S. President Donald Trump, but his speech was seen as a critique of Trump's chaotic and aggressive policies on trade and international relations. The U.S. president is scheduled to arrive at the World Economic Forum today, the same day Carney is leaving. Sidhu says it didn't make sense for the prime minister to extend his stay.
There's things to do back in Canada, as you know. Parliament's resuming on Monday. We have our cabinet retreat, and there's things that we've got to take care of for Canadians.
Asked whether the prime minister's speech might face pushback from the Trump administration, Sidhu dodged. The U.S., he says, will always be an important trading partner for Canada, but right now, he says, Canada is looking for new partners around the globe. Tom Perry, CBC News, Quarton, Switzerland.
The World Economic Forum in Davos is known as a pretty glitzy affair. Politicians are the main draw, but billionaires and celebrities also attend. It's causing growing concern that the super wealthy are buying political influence. An open letter has been published this morning. It is signed by people like actor Mark Ruffalo, musician Brian Eno, and philanthropist Abigail Disney. Nearly 400 signatures in total. All of them are millionaires and billionaires. They say extreme wealth is polluting politics, driving social exclusion, and fueling the climate emergency. They want world leaders to increase taxes on the super rich. Canada's Governor General says this country's support for Greenlanders is very strong, and it's up to them to determine their future. Mary Simon spoke with CBC News from the embassy in Mexico City. She's meeting with the president of Mexico to advance bilateral trade with Canada. Simon says Canadian and Greenlandic Inuit share a common goal.
As Inuit of Canada, we are very self-determining people, and we've negotiated agreements with different governments to advance that. And I think that my own personal feelings are that the Greenlanders have that right as well. Every people has the right to determine how they want to be.
The Governor General says the people of Greenland are nervous about U.S. President Donald Trump's threats of annexation, and they do not want their relationship with Denmark to end. Sweden is taking a stand against U.S. President Donald Trump's so-called Board of Peace. Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson told reporters this morning Sweden will not participate. Trump says the board will oversee next steps in Gaza, and he'll be the chair. The proposal was initially criticized by the office of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Some of his far-right allies say Israel should take sole responsibility for Gaza's future. But Netanyahu now says he is willing to join the Board of Peace. The man who killed Japan's former prime minister has been sentenced to life behind bars. He shot Shinzo Abe in 2022 during a speech. The killer says it was revenge for Abe's perceived political ties to a controversial church. But as the CBC's Malone Mullen reports, despite his guilty plea, some see the killer as a victim.
These supporters of the man who shot Shinzo Abe to death say life in prison is too harsh a sentence, protesting outside the courtroom as Tetsuya Yamagami learned his fate. Nearly 700 people lined up for a ticket to the killer's sentencing. In spite of the late Prime Minister's popularity, empathy for Yamagami persists. Some observers told CBC News they hoped the judge would go easy on the killer. This woman hopes he'll be rehabilitated. Others here say Yamagami's crime was a reaction to an imbalance of power.
An instance of what I would call counter-hegemonic violence from below.
Canadian Setsu Shigematsu is a professor at the University of California. She studies political revolt and wanted a front row seat to the trial.
When we really get to the root of what causes this kind of violence against authority, there are a lot of legitimate moral reasons why people act this way. And
Abe led Japan for over 8 years. His killer testified that he targeted Abe because he believed the politician had ties to the Unification Church, a South Korean religious group known for its outsized political influence. Yamagami says the church preyed on his mother, demanding she donate the family's savings, leaving them destitute. A Japanese court dissolved the church last year. Malone Mullen, CBC News, Nara, Japan.
The spouse of the deadliest mass shooter in Canadian history is sharing her story. The gunman disguised himself as an RCMP officer and went on a rampage in Nova Scotia. As the CBC's Kayla Hounsell reports, now 6 years later, she's revealing more about how she lived with intimate partner violence.
Things that happen behind closed doors need to be told.
For 19 years, Lisa Banfield stayed silent about life with the man who would become the worst mass shooter in modern Canadian history. Not anymore. She says for much of their time together, Gabriel Wortman abused her.
And Gabriel threatened my family, so I couldn't leave.
In April 2020, Wortman went on a rampage, masquerading as an RCMP officer with a replica police car, killing 22 people, including a pregnant woman. It began with an attack on Banfield. Now she's telling her story of intimate partner violence in a book and to the Current's Matt Galloway. But the families of those murdered are still grieving, and many are angry about Banfield's book.
It's brought on a lot of trauma.
Tammy Oliver McCurdy lost her sister, Jolene Oliver, brother-in-law, Aaron Tuck, and 17-year-old niece, Emily.
It's about that she's making money off the backs of our deceased family members.
The RCMP originally charged Banfield with providing ammunition. The charge was withdrawn after she completed a restorative justice program. The public inquiry examining the mass shooting was clear. Banfield is a victim and was re-victimized by the RCMP.
People are going to say whatever they want about me, but if I could help one person, I can take that.
Banfield says she lives with survivor's guilt and is still in therapy, but also finding her voice. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Halifax.
You can hear the complete interview with Lisa Banfield this morning at 8:37 on The Current. That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. We're live in downtown Winnipeg. It's cold, not shocking. It's January, but we do have some cold and blowing snow advisories for the province. Thanks for being with us on CBC. This hour on the show, the mayor of the city of Winnipeg is going to join us, and we are going to be talking to Scott Gillingham about the new year. It's our first monthly interview for the new year. So we're going to check on some basics, transportation, housing development, and population growth. But could our population grow because people start to come here from the United States? As you might have been hearing in the last 24 hours, the mayor has said, Scott Gillingham has said that he's been in conversation with Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry, and they are preparing here to, just in case there's going to be some people that are going to be crossing over into Canada, given what is going on down there. So stay tuned. We'll have that discussion with Mayor Scott Gillingham coming up right here on Information Radio. Plus, if you have the urge to purge, what do you need to keep in terms of your financial stuff? So before you go crazy shredding everything, we'll get some advice on that. Right now, let's go to developing news this morning in our CBC Manitoba News Center with Heather Wells. We are actually first going to go to what is happening in the weather situation, actually, as we await Heather in the news center. I mentioned, Abby, light snow -14. What are we getting for the day?
Yeah, we have that cold front really coming through the province this morning, triggering that yellow blowing snow advisory and blizzard warnings for some areas in southern Manitoba towards the lake. We're looking at winds coming from the northwest, gusting all the way to 80 kilometers per hour. So it's going to be creating near zero visibility and a very dangerous travel conditions for people around the Red River Valley region through the lake Winnipeg North Basin. So you need to take it easy. These conditions will stay through the day, and then we'll see it even continue into the afternoon period. But if you're not traveling, please take it easy. Winnipeg right now, -16 at the airport, -16 within the city limits. We'll see temperatures just hover around this for most of the day before we get a high of -14.
All right. Thanks, Abby. Let's get into the morning commute, and then we'll go to headlines. Corey's popped in studio.
Yes, it's a pretty quiet commute so far. Haven't heard of any major issues out there yet. Might be a little bit slippery for some folks, and just north of the city on the highways, Highway 7 in particular. Looks like on Manitoba 511 that you might get some poor visibility and some covered highway conditions this morning. It's also around Stonewall too. Other than that, though, if you do see something going on, if you want to give me a call, you can let me know. The number 204-788-3093.
All right, thank you, Corey. And now let's head over to Heather and find out what's busy in the newsroom. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. Yes, someone's going to have to teach me how to read a clock. So apologies for that. We will hear from the family of a Winnipeg teenager who was killed in 1984. 13-year-old Candace Dirkson. A man convicted and then later acquitted in that case now faces new charges in Vancouver. So more on that coming up. And a shortage of respiratory therapists in Manitoba has reached a crisis point. That is according to a union for healthcare workers in this province. The Manitoba Association of Healthcare Professionals says vacancy rates have reached dangerous levels at the Health Sciences Centre, St. Boniface Hospital, and Grace Hospital. We're going to hear more at 7:30.
Well, deep somewhere in whatever room in your home doubles as an office, you probably have a junk drawer or a box, or maybe you've got something in the basement where you stuff those important financial papers. You're afraid to get rid of them. Maybe you're too lazy to organize, and then you get the urge to purge, especially in these cold days when we're stuck inside. So what do you keep and what do you throw away? Before you overdo it, Evelyn Jacks is with us, president of the Knowledge Bureau, a financial education organization. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm doing well. So let's start with, how long you have to keep things, because there's sort of people that say, okay, I've never been audited. I'm not going to get audited. Do I really have to keep all of this? What should we pay attention to, Evelyn?
Yes, well, good starting question, because there is a specific rule, and that is that you must keep your records for a minimum of 6 years from the end of the last tax year to which they relate. But that means different things to different people. So, for example, if you are a business, you might be on a fiscal year end, a year end that's other than January to December. But for most individuals, the year end for filing a tax return is a calendar year end. But we file the return, of course, in April of the next year. So to make it simple, if 2025, the tax year we're going to be filing right now, is reassessed, then you're going to have to keep your records until about 2031.
And so what if you didn't? Can you get them from your accountant should something arise, or how worried should you be about that?
Yes, and in an electronic world, that's become a little bit easier. And in fact, CRA is increasingly pushing taxpayers to that electronic world. Only about 7% of people file their returns in paper now. So a great thing is to scan in your receipts, and if you're a do-it-yourselfer, to make sure your electronic files are organized. If you are working with a tax professional, then they will generally keep those files for you, and that's a good plan B.
What other documents might people not be thinking about that they actually should make sure they don't purge if they're going through the house?
Another great question, because here we are in a situation in 2025 where nothing's really happened with the cottage or your small business, but maybe in the future you're going to dispose of some of your taxable assets. And so when we do that, then we're able to record to reduce capital gains in the future. In the case of real estate, for example, things that we've done to improve the cottage, that deck that we put on or the new roof that we put onto the rental property. So you're going to want to keep receipts for any improvements, especially for real estate, in your files until the time of disposition. And remember, disposition can be actual for sales proceeds, but it can be deemed, such as in the case of the death of a taxpayer. Very quickly, one other rule, and that is keep all your minute books and important documents for the structure of your business if you're a small business owner.
How worried should people be about, receipts? Because sometimes, you get these receipts in the bottom of your purse or your bags and you think, okay, this is personal. It might show part of my Visa number. Or how worried should people be? And are there specific receipts that you might want to keep? You've just alluded to ones if you improve your home, but what about other things in your life?
Well, sometimes things change. So, for example, you might unexpectedly find that there was a job termination, and we're hearing about a lot of downsizing, particularly in the federal public service, rather. And so, when things change, you may have to do a pivot. Maybe you're having to start a consulting service out of your home, for example, or things have changed with your employer, and you are going to become a home-based employee rather than an office-based employee. In that case, you may be able to claim office and the home expenses. And if that's possible for you, then a portion of things like your utilities might become deductible, depending on what your status is, an employee, a commission sales employee, or a self-employed person. So check out those office and the home expenses, and don't throw away some of those bills that you have expended for keeping your house warm, dry, keeping the water bill going, paying the insurance, etc.
Do we need our house tax assessments, or do we need our, cable bills and things like that, those things that come regularly?
Yes, absolutely. Also some internet bills as well, because some of those will qualify for home office expenses. But depending on what your status is, you may be able to claim your property tax bill. Also, if you have a change of use in your property, so you decide you're going to rent out, half of your duplex that you own, then make sure that you have those property tax records, any interest charges that you have, and so on.
Just last, Evelyn, for people that are, going through their homes right now, what's the best way to get rid of the paper documents and then maybe even those digital documents and such?
There is a way for you to actually request permission from CRA. There's a special form called a T137, request for destruction of records. And so you might be interested in a more formal procedure if you're an executor of an estate, for example. But in this case, you're going to have to answer some very specific questions. For example, make sure that you have filed all your income tax returns for the period in which you are requesting, and that any legislative appeals period has transpired. And of course, be prepared for a tax audit. CRA can request to see some of your records before you destroy them. And so I would recommend that if you're going to do that, then perhaps work with a tax professional. Otherwise, sticking to that rule that we spoke about earlier, a minimum of 6 years after the year in which your tax return was assessed should be fine for you.
All right, Evelyn, thank you very much for the advice.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
I love Evelyn Jackson, president of Knowledge Bureau, a financial education organization. I have to say, I've been sort of going through my own home here, and it's interesting the folks you talk to when you go to buy bins. So I've been around town trying to buy these plastic bins at various retailers, and it's so interesting because people have engaged in conversation with me. They're like, is this a good one? How strong is that one? Where do you keep it? What do you keep in it? And there's all these strange little impromptu conversations going on. You can find all those bins often at the front of the stores right right now. It's a January thing, I think, in Manitoba. Yesterday, I had someone ask me if it's like a seasonal thing. Why is everyone buying these bins? So it could just be because it's cold and we're hunkered inside and looking around at our stuff. It is lightly snowing, minus 15 right now, and we're not going to get much warmer, as Abby's been saying, than minus 14.
Local news is in decline across Canada, and this is bad news for all of us. With less local news, noise, rumors, and misinformation fill the void, and it gets harder to separate truth from fiction. That's why CBC News is putting more journalists in more places across Canada, reporting on the ground from where you live, telling the stories that matter to all of us. Because local news is big news. Choose news, not noise. CBC News.
Well, this is definitely local news. A lot of people in Manitoba are reacting to the loss of Dr. Barry Lavali, who died suddenly. He accomplished and an advocate in our community, a chief executive officer most recently of Kiwi Tinuk Inyinu Minawan, which works to improve healthcare for First Nations people all over northern Manitoba. And the news came yesterday that he'd suddenly died. He's been on our program a number of times, making sense of often some of the worst moments in specifically our healthcare history in this province and across the country. He also was one of the people that was deciding and reviewing what should happen after Brian Sinclair lost his life after waiting hours in the HSC years ago. And he's just been at the forefront of so much mentorship and understanding. His organization, the healthcare organization, supports 23 northern First Nations, Manitoba First Nations. So news came yesterday that he had died. And as the tributes continue to pour out for Dr. Lavali, we went into our archives to pull a poignant moment where he was in his role, as he so often was, of advocacy. He was speaking at a rally in support of a First Nations man who was told his appendicitis was a, quote, hangover, and he was denied care. And here's a little bit of what Dr. Lavali had to say about the ongoing issue of anti-Indigenous racism in our healthcare system at that time, and also how to obviously combat it.
If you are a First Nations person and you look like a First Nations person, whatever that might be, by the system, or if you have a card that identifies your treaty status of your treaty, you are at risk going into any healthcare system within Manitoba. There's a risk that you will not be treated correctly, you will not be listened to, you will not be offered the diagnostics, nor will you be offered treatment or follow-up. That's not all cases. Let me make that clear. But there is a risk for anybody who's First Nations in Manitoba to go to any healthcare system in Manitoba. I'm talking about the hospitals, the secondary and tertiary hospitals. That is a fact. Some of the solutions that we're working on for northern communities, 23 sovereign communities that we work with, is we're looking to take over the healthcare system. We're looking to be drivers of the healthcare system. We want the resources because we can do better, okay? There's no doubt about that. That doesn't mean that we wouldn't hire white and all other doctors.
But it's First Nations-led care by First Nations-led healthcare professionals to First Nations Manitobans.
Yeah, and that would include non-Indigenous people. There's no doubt about that. Not everybody acts on the hatred that they might feel towards First Nations people, but we need our own system that could run parallel, can actually help change systems and improve even care for white people in this province.
As you move toward bigger goals that you're talking about, obviously, how in the meantime do you, what would you say to people listening about how they advocate within the system that we have?
Well, I tell everybody, I'm talking to non-Indigenous people as well, know your rights when you go see a provider. Know your rights and demand your rights, but be very careful. One of the common features for First Nations people when they actually advocate, they're termed angry, and they're generally a security guard will be called and they'll be kicked out. That is a common feature. So be careful for non-Indigenous people as well. Sometimes when you advocate, the system is not prepared to listen to your concerns and to take your concerns seriously. Sometimes you could be thrown out. And we have to develop systems. And the minister knows this, the Minister of Health knows this. We have to develop systems that are responsive immediately to the concerns of a patient, all patients. And I don't think we do that very well here at all, not yet.
So we went into the archives today as people are remembering Dr. Barry Lavali. That's a conversation that part of an interview I had with him less than a year ago, last February, as he continued, as he so often did, to advocate for the rights of Indigenous people in our healthcare system. News came yesterday that Dr. Barry Lavali, a prominent Indigenous physician, had died suddenly, and people are still coming to terms with that today. We'll hear more in the news as well. You can read more about his life and work at cbc.ca/Manitoba. It is 7:26. It is Wednesday morning, January 21st. Let's find out what's going on in sports. And for that, we turn our attention to Paul McGowan this morning. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Marcy.
So the Jets got a win last night over the Blues.
Yeah, and in the process, leapfrogged the Blues in the standings, which is not much, but as Scott Arniel said last week, the goal right now is to pick off one team at a time, and a 3-1 final last night helps that cause. Also gives the Jets points in their last 5 games. Now, besides the empty netter at the end of regulation last night, both Jets goals came on the power play. Scott Arniel, though, was quick to credit the penalty kill as well.
Hand in hand. We didn't give up much on our PK, and that was a big turning point for me. That was the one that kind of got us feeling real good about the 2 power play goals by us got us in and running in the game, got the crowd into it. That kill by us on the end of that one was large. And those were things that, to me, in games that are, this type of time of year, specialty teams might win you a game, and I think they did tonight for us.
Yeah, specialty teams, but also Mark Scheifele, who just keeps pushing to be the injury replacement at the Olympics for Team Canada. 2 goals for Scheifele, plus an assist last night. Jets are off tonight, back home again tomorrow against Florida.
Let's go to basketball. The Raptors got a win last night also in California.
And in convincing fashion, they beat up on the Golden State Warriors last night, 145-127. And in fairness, this is a Warrior team that is licking its wounds right now after finding out that star Jimmy Butler will miss the rest of the season. But give the Raptors credit. They were dominant last night from start to finish. Nobody more so than Emmanuel Quickly, 40 points for him to tie a career high.
Just the mindset to dominate, be in attack mode from the jump. When you're missing, you got to keep shooting, and when you're making, you got to keep shooting. So you can't change just by results. You got to live, be process oriented, and just rely on your work. That kind of got me going as well as my teammates.
Emmanuel Quickly talking a mile a minute to Sportsnet there. Now, 40 points sounds impressive on its own. If you look a little closer, though, Quickly put up 40 on 11 of 13 shooting, missed just 2 shots all night. Heck of a game from him. Raptors are back at it tonight, headed up to even more Northern California for a game with Sacramento.
So true story, last night I was watching one of the ads for the Olympic Games coming up, and I looked at my husband and I just went, ooh, ski jumping. So I was reminded of those sports that we really, I don't watch all the time, but during the Olympics I just love them. So Canada's named its team for ski jump for the Olympics now.
Well, and to your point, Marcy, it's an incredible sport. They are in the air for 7 full seconds, I think, is the average. They fly the length of a football field. But yes, Canada has named its team for the Olympics. One of those members, Abby Strait, who was part of Canada's first ever ski jump medal, a bronze in Beijing. She is competing in both the normal hill, but also there's now a women's large hill event, and Strait is thrilled at the extra opportunity to jump.
It's just another step in the right direction, and it's a really cool time to be a part of the sport because we are getting steps forward every year on the women's side, and not having to just fight just to be in the Olympics like the women did for Sochi. It's a privilege, and yeah, it's groundbreaking. I love making history. We keep doing it over and over again.
Tara, to your point about loving ski jumping, Abby Strait's teammate Nicole Moore was asked what it's like to be in the air. I won't give you all of what she said, but part of it, she said, quote, although you're flying through the air, you feel very connected with what you're doing and who you are as a person in that moment, and everything feels like it will be okay, which makes me feel like I've been going about life wrong. Maybe instead of, therapy or yoga or mindfulness, I should be jumping off of 120-meter high ski hills to find peace.
We'd like you to come back tomorrow, so maybe not. Stick with yoga. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, Marcy.
Paul McGowan with our morning sports report. Mayor Scott Gillingham will be here for our first monthly interview of the year to weigh in a number of issues in the next half hour. Right now, though, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is -15 in downtown Winnipeg. Our temperature's not moving a whole lot. What will be moving, though, is the wind. It's going to become Northwest 40, gusting to 60 this morning, giving us a risk of frostbite and blowing snow through the day. And tonight, we chill out at minus 30. A man who was convicted and later acquitted in a high-profile Winnipeg murder case faces several new charges in Vancouver. Vancouver police confirm Mark Edward Grant has been charged with unlawful confinement, sexual assault with a weapon, and uttering threats related to an incident on January 8th. He was previously convicted of the 1984 murder of 13-year-old Candace Dirkson in 2011, but he was later acquitted of that crime. Candace's mother, Wilma Dirkson, says she felt pain when she heard about Grant's new charges yesterday. She says she knows how hard it will be for the alleged victim and their loved ones.
Just feeling the love for the victims and the victim's family, just knowing what they're going to go through. It's just hard. We've been going through it for 41 years, and it's just hard. It's a hard life.
Grant is expected to appear in a BC court later this month. Well, as temperatures drop into the low minus 20s this week, people who live and work in a 3-story complex in Wolseley are preparing for more discomfort. That building at 875 Westminster has been without proper heat since early January. Raina Enns lives there. She says she's fed up with the situation and has started staying at a hotel.
Anytime I've reached out for an update directly to somebody, it's either been, I'll get back to you tomorrow and I hear nothing, or it's just a generic, we're working on it. So, they're not doing what they need to, and they forget that we're human beings sitting in here freezing.
In a statement, Thorwin Properties says the boiler had to be shut off because of carbon monoxide levels. The company says it's working on permanent repairs and in the meantime has provided tenants with heaters. The Grand Chief of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs is remembering the life and career of a prominent Indigenous physician. 64-year-old Dr. Barry Lavali died unexpectedly, according to a statement yesterday from Kiiwetinoong Inanu Miniyawan. That organization supports healthcare in Northern First Nations. Lavali had been CEO there since 2020. He also worked as a physician, an educator, and researcher. Grand Chief Kyra Wilson says Lavali will be remembered for his advocacy.
I just think about, the time that it takes to become a doctor. And he invested in that time, not only for himself, for his family, but for all of our First Nations people, not only Manitoba, but across the country.
Lavali was also part of the Brian Sinclair Working Group. Sinclair was a First Nations man who died in a Winnipeg ER while waiting for care. Manitoba is going back to the private nursing agencies it dropped, asking for help. Only days after cutting ties with dozens of nursing agencies, the province is allowing some healthcare facilities to ask those same agencies for help filling nursing shifts. The health minister says it's being done to ensure patient safety. The change to move to just 4 agencies took effect last week. Since then, some rural hospitals have struggled with high vacancy rates. Darlene Jackson heads the Manitoba Nurses Union.
I don't agree with going back to agency, but for the nurses' sake and for the patient care sake, I think there's nothing else we can do at this point, although I find it really unnerving that, a government wouldn't anticipate these issues.
The province wants to reduce reliance on private nursing agencies. Costs have risen from $26 million a year to $80 million in just 4 years. A shortage of respiratory therapists in Manitoba has reached a crisis point. That is according to a union for healthcare workers in this province. The Manitoba Association of Healthcare Professionals says vacancy rates have reached dangerous levels at the Health Sciences Centre, St. Boniface Hospital, and Grace Hospital. It estimates 50 positions are vacant at those 3 hospitals alone. Cherie Jagolic has been a respiratory therapist for 35 years at St. Boniface.
My biggest worry is that we're going to lose more people from the profession. We're already short-staffed. There is the burnout. People get sick. People get tired.
The association warns the shortage could get worse with a wave of retirees on the horizon. The province says it has doubled the number of training seats and is actively recruiting respiratory therapists. Well, getting on the board, scoring first.
Morrissey shoots and scores!
Josh Morrissey with a power play goal in the first period on TSN as the Jets beat the St. Louis Blues 3-1 last night. Moments later, Mark Scheifele also scores, also on a power play. Morrissey says those goals were important in a grueling schedule.
It was big to get off to a good start in a tough back-to-back.
The Jets don't get a lot of time to rest now. They're right back at it tomorrow, hosting former coach Paul Maurice and his Florida Panthers. You can find the latest news. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, Heather Wells, thank you.
Thank you.
Time for our regional forecast now with Abby Adiemi on CBC.
Good morning once again. Most of the regions waking up to this cold front that's going to be bringing blowing snow to the south and extreme cold towards the northern parts of the province. Hence, we have this yellow snow warning and blizzard warnings across a lot of regions in southern Manitoba and towards the lakes this morning. Expect gusts and northwest winds near zero visibility at times, and this will make travel really difficult through the afternoon period and even as you prepare to go home. So consider how you make your plans because things will not be improving until later in the evening. Up north, we have orange extreme cold warning in effect around Lynn Lake, Tudula Lake, Brochet. We're seeing multi-day freeze settle in, life-threatening wind chills. We're talking about the wind chills this next 3 days will be between minus 45 and minus 50. So take it easy. Frostbite in minutes. Winnipeg right now, we're looking at temperatures around minus 16. It's going to hover around that mark for most of the day. And then tonight we'll see temperature drop to a frigid minus 30 before that wind chill hits us at minus 43 overnight.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
With a quick look at your commute, here's Corey.
It's been a quiet commute, actually, overall this morning. Haven't heard of any major issues out there. But if you're walking, you're biking, you're driving, you see something, you can give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number, 204-788-3093.
Well, I see that the mayor's here, just walked in, so we'll talk to Scott Gillingham shortly. He's here for our first monthly interview of 2026, so stay tuned. He will sit down with us. First, though, we've connected for our medical column with Dr. Raj Bhardwaj to talk about milk. It doesn't taste any different, but more vitamin D is being added to your milk, and that's thanks to new regulations from Health Canada. Since the new year, milk and margarine producers both have been required to fortify their products with more than double the amount that they did before. To talk about why the decision was made and what it means for your health, Dr. Raj Bhardwaj is here. Good morning.
Good morning, Marcy.
So before we look more at these new Health Canada numbers, remind us what vitamin D is and what it does for our bodies.
Yeah, so vitamin D is the blanket name for a bunch of related chemicals that your body makes or that you get from your diet. So it's known as the sunshine vitamin because the ultraviolet light from the sun is required to convert other chemicals like cholesterol into vitamin D3 in your skin. So what it does is basically it helps to absorb and retain calcium and phosphorus in your body, which is essential for making healthy, strong bones and teeth. If you don't get enough, you literally get soft bones that can bow and bend under your own weight. And in kids, that's called rickets. And in adults, that's called osteomalacia, which is just a fancy way of saying soft bones. And that's opposed to osteoporosis, which is porous bones, and actually are, instead of soft, they're often brittle. And that comes from not having enough calcium and vitamin D. So there's a bunch of other functions that vitamin D serves other than just making your bones and teeth healthy, because it is a helper chemical. So it fine-tunes your immune system. It helps cells to grow and divide properly to make sure they don't turn cancerous. It does a bunch of things throughout your body. And in the summer, your body can make all the vitamin D it needs if you're exposed to enough sunshine. Problem is we live in Canada, and so for about 6 months of the year, the sunshine you're exposed to, even on a nice, warm, sunny day in the winter, just isn't strong enough to trigger the chemical reaction in your skin to produce vitamin D. So we have to get it through our diet. And diet-wise, you get it through fatty fish. So a tin of salmon has about 10 micrograms of vitamin D. You can get a tiny bit from egg yolks, like a microgram per yolk, or in foods that have vitamin D added to them, like dairy products.
So let's talk about Health Canada requiring more vitamin D to be added to those dairy products and margarine included. What's the thinking behind that?
Yeah, so according to Health Canada and Statistics Canada, the likelihood that Canadians will have low vitamin D levels more than doubles through the winter months. So they're mandating that producers increase the amount of vitamin D added to milk, and like you said, more than double. So from 2.3 micrograms per cup of milk to 5 micrograms per cup of milk, and about 4 micrograms per tablespoon of margarine. So this process started back in 2022 when they asked producers to voluntarily add that amount. But as of December 31st, now it's mandatory. And the amounts are important, okay? So it's, like I said, 5 micrograms per cup of milk. Well, how much should a person be getting? Well, people between 1 and 70 years old should get about 15 micrograms per day. Babies need a bit less, older people need a little bit more. It gets a bit confusing because if you look at your bottle of vitamin D pills or drops, it's often not labeled in micrograms, it's labeled in international units, or IU. So the most common dose for vitamin D pills is 1,000 international units. That's 25 micrograms. So one of those pills is more than enough per day. Now, some people also wonder, well, why is it milk that's supplemented and not something else? And that's basically because milk historically is a common food that most people consume, and it's also helpful to have vitamin D and calcium absorbed at the same time, and milk has calcium in it.
Is it possible to get too much vitamin D?
Yeah, so it is possible, but only if you get it by eating. So not if you get it from sunshine exposure. Which is, I think, a really cool biochemical thing. If your body is flush with vitamin D in the summer, or because you went on a sunny holiday in the wintertime, say, your body can tell that it has enough vitamin D, and it prevents the overproduction of vitamin D in your skin from sunshine exposure. But if you take vitamin D as a supplement, or through just eating a ton of fatty fish, then that gets absorbed through your gut, and it gets stored in your fat cells, even if you have plenty stored. So it's difficult to get too much vitamin D, but it's not unheard of. And if you do get too much vitamin D, then you might suffer from things like nausea and vomiting, muscle pain, bone pain, kidney problems, including kidney stones. So it's not awesome. So because of that, Health Canada also sets upper limits of intake as well, which is 100 micrograms for adults, and then it's different. It's lower for babies. So if you got all your vitamin D through milk, if you think about, 5 micrograms per cup, my max that I should take is 100 micrograms, you would have to drink 20 cups of milk per day to hit that upper limit, even with these new higher supplement levels that just kicked in. People also ask me all the time, how much do we get through sunshine? Mm-hmm. It's really tough to estimate that, because it depends on, which latitude you're at, how sunny it is, how much cloud cover there is, if you're wearing sunscreen, what kind of clothes are you wearing, all sorts of things. But imagine if you were just a regular sunny day in the summertime, you were out in a t-shirt, no sunscreen, your body can make upwards of 25 micrograms in the first 10 minutes of sun exposure. So no need to skip the sunscreen, and no need to sort of lie in the sun for a long, long time.
All right, Dr. Bardwaj, thank you.
My pleasure.
That's Dr. Raj Bardwaj in our medical column talking about milk today. 7:44 a.m. is the time. Now, while Dr. Bardwaj and I were talking, we actually got a call about our local drive. Maureen said the south perimeter both ways is really slick. She actually saw a few cars in the ditch this morning. So it's just our reminder that while conditions are, probably better and we're getting used to this winter driving and such, you still really need to pay attention to where it's slippery. So take that easy. It is 788-3093 where you can reach Corey Funk live. You're listening to CBC. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You're on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube. Now, speaking of live, a lot of analysis in our first hour of the show about Donald Trump, the U.S. president, speaking at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. And he is actually on stage right now. We certainly are going to get some analysis at the top of the clock, but Abby's just going to bring up the U.S. president mid-speech. He's already been talking about how he describes his country right now as one of the, quote, hottest in the world. Here's a bit of what he's saying to the crowd live.
And there's so much potential in so many nations. The result was record budget and trade deficits and a growing sovereign deficit driven by the largest wave of mass migration in human history. We've never seen anything like it. Quite frankly, many parts of our world are being destroyed before our very eyes, and the leaders don't even understand what's happening. And the ones that do understand aren't doing anything about it. Virtually all of the so-called experts predicted my plans to end this failed model would trigger a global recession and runaway inflation. But we have proven them wrong. It's actually just the opposite. In 1 year, our agenda has produced a transformation like America has not seen in over 100 years. Instead of closing down energy plants, we're opening them up. Instead of building ineffective, money-losing windmills, we're taking them down and not approving any. Instead of empowering bureaucrats, we're firing them, and they're going out and getting jobs in the private sector for 2 and 3 times what they were making in government. So they started off hating me when we fired them, and now they love me. Instead of raising taxes on domestic producers, we're lowering them and raising tariffs on foreign nations to pay for the damage that they've caused. In 12 months, we have removed over 270,000 bureaucrats from the federal payrolls, the largest single-year reduction in government employment since the end of World War II. Nobody thought that was coming, but we had no choice. To make a country great, you can't have all federal jobs. We've cut federal spending by $100 billion and slashed the federal...
As you can hear, the U.S. president addressing world leaders in Davos, Switzerland right now, talking about the changes made on U.S. soil in the record that, as he sees it, has been successful, and talking about cuts to the federal service, and very much, as all leaders are, talking about the states of their economies and their positions moving forward. Prime Minister of Canada yesterday, Mark Carney, got quite a lot of attention, including a standing ovation for how he was positioning Canada's role in the world and how he was describing that, but also how he called this moment a rupture in what's happening in geopolitics. He also used the language, while not mentioning the United States at all. He also, however, did talk about not mourning past systems of how different countries did business, because we're not going to be going back, as he said. We have to find a new way forward with, as he described, middle powers like Canada to be working together. So we're all waiting to see if U.S. President Donald Trump this morning is going to be mentioning anything about Carney, his speech, Canada, of course. I think a lot of us leaning in for that. And so this morning, right now, we have the mayor of the city of Winnipeg in live, 12 minutes to 8 o'clock, which is interesting because we're going to talk about the states to start. Good morning, Scott Gillingham.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So you actually, I understand, reached out in an email to Minneapolis Mayor Jacob Fry, and why did you do that? And how could Winnipeg potentially be affected by what's happening in the states politically, specifically with the actions of ICE and the reactions to ICE in Minneapolis?
Winnipeg has 11 sister cities around the world. Minneapolis is one of those sister cities. A couple of years ago, we celebrated our 50th anniversary of that sister city relationship. So it's a friendly relationship, and Mayor Fry invited me to Minneapolis in the summer of 2023. We were there, spent some time together. We've been in touch ever since. And so I just sent him a text message. It basically said, we in Winnipeg were watching with concern what is happening in your city. Our thoughts are with you, and my hope is that Minneapolis returns to peace and a peaceful city as soon as possible. And as a mayor, I can't imagine what he and the citizens of Minneapolis are going through right now.
And of course, disagreements between his city and his state governance, and then the federal government and what they're doing with their operations on the ground. What about our part? I mean, I was reading what you had shared with one of my colleagues. The goal to prepare, reading his language, is to prepare Winnipeg for what you've described as a once unimaginable possibility. So are we expecting U.S. residents might come here?
I don't know what we to expect, and that's what I was saying to the media yesterday is there's no playbook for this. The world has changed, completely changed. I thought our Prime Minister, his speech yesterday on the world stage was articulate, it was clear, and I think it really gave us an insight into what our Prime Minister is seeing. And I think, as I said yesterday, as mayors across this nation, we should be standing in solidarity with premiers and our Prime Minister, because the world has changed completely, and our relationship with the United States, I don't believe, will ever be the same.
Do we need to, what might we need to think about around military personnel who are based in Winnipeg?
We have a lot of military personnel based here, of course, with 17 Wing, with the Canadian Air Force, has a large presence here. I think we need to be prepared as a community, first of all, to support them in their work. If there are going to be deployments that are supporting NATO allies or other, in other parts of the world, we already have people on deployment now, but if that's going to increase, we as a city, I think, as neighbors, have to be aware of that and have to be supporting those families who are defending our country and defending the values that Canada stands for. And I think now is a time for us as Canadians. I'm a very proud Canadian, love my nation. And I think that, this is a time for us to really reflect on what we value as Canadians and do all we can to uphold those values and defend those values with like-minded nations around the world.
When you use the word value and reflect on what that is for you, what's at the top of the list?
I think freedom, for sure, equality, opportunity, and I think it's running now counter to frankly, an imperialist mindset and actions and framework that we see in other countries. And again, I go back to the Prime Minister's speech. I think he articulated it very well, and it really shows how our world has completely changed, and locally it will impact us. I think it impacts our businesses, it impacts our families, who, as I said, are serving in the Canadian Forces, and it has caused us to rethink what our international relationships are and will be in the future.
8 minutes to 8 o'clock. This is our regular monthly interview with Mayor Scott Gillingham, but we're talking about bigger issues after, of course, watching U.S. President Donald Trump right now speaking live in Davos, and then our Prime Minister yesterday. Let's bring it much more closer to home here and to something that actually is concerning some folks. One of them we actually had on in the first hour of the show, so we're going to play you a little clip here because she's actually concerned about birds. There's about 600 Manitobans who've sent emails to the city, I understand. Shelley Bone's one of them. She's with Bird Friendly Winnipeg. She has her PhD in integrative biology. She said last year when the city announced they were looking to change some restrictions so birds didn't hit windows and new developments that have to be built differently, that was a moment for her. But then now this has been looked at again and might be pulled back. Here's what she had to say.
Well, individually, just a little bit sad. I was really proud of my home province and my home city to have this bird-friendly policy in place even before there was a bird-friendly organization championing it. They just did it, and I was so proud. And then to hear that after pushback from developers, they're thinking of pulling it back, it's kind of disappointing.
What's your response to that? I mean, I know this is actually going to come up today. There's a report proposing getting rid of it. Developers saying this could be too expensive. She's saying we should value this. What do you think?
There is a hearing today, and so because it's a hearing, I have to, there's only so many things I can say because we're going to be talking about that today and hearing from advocates that want us to bring in and hold to some bird-friendly policy. We'll hear from developers as well and interested citizens. And so, I want to give credit to Councillor Janice Lukes, my colleague, who really has been, has talked about bird-friendly policies and regulations to try to, provide protection for birds, migratory birds and other birds. And so we'll have it's on the agenda today. It'll be a big topic that we're listening as a council, hearing, weighing the options about what can and should be done.
Okay, we'll report later on more of the discussion. Two more things I want to cover with you, if we may, Mayor Gillingham, here on CBC. Help us make sense of the housing starts. So 5,000 new homes in Winnipeg last year, second highest total in our history, up 12%. That's one of the numbers. More than double the Canadian average. So that seems obviously like good news. But then fewer homes finished construction. They dropped more than 35% compared to the year before. So does this mean, and I hope listeners can follow my logic here, does it mean we'll be back to some, regular numbers of starts or fewer starts or even lower this year? Because if builders can't build fast enough, we won't be able to catch up. Is this a good news story or where's the cause for concern?
Well, it's for sure a good news story. As you say, Winnipeg's number doubled the national average when it came to housing starts. We were at 12.3%. The national average was 5.6%. In regards to the number of completions being lower, I mean, once housing has been permitted, there could be a number of factors really that influence the completion dates. It could be the reporting of the timeline of reporting. It could start in 1 year and not get completed within that year, and it will get captured as a completion in the following year. But this really would be a good question too, I think, for the development community as to what factors are causing or are behind not completing the housing that's being started as quickly as possible. But overall, It's very good news for Winnipeg. We have talked about, with you before, you've reported on the fact that we don't have enough housing in Winnipeg.
Mm-hmm.
We as a council have been really focused with our public service as well, working very hard together to get housing approved. And that has been happening. We're getting housing approved faster.
Do we need
Housing
more
is
builders?
I don't know that we need more builders.
Or more people in the trades?
It could be. We have put a lot of approvals through, which is really, really exciting. In fact, it's been reported just last week. I think we were talking about it, that right now they're under construction or about to begin construction. In Winnipeg's downtown alone, there will be up to 5,000 new residents, living in Winnipeg's downtown, because there's so much housing being built in the center of our city. So it's really, really good news. It kind of couples with the population growth that we have seen. Now, I think, the population growth rate will begin to wane a little bit. We're already seeing that. But we've hit 850,000 people in Winnipeg. We need housing for all those people.
Okay, last minute, and we had a really comprehensive conversation with Bjorn Radstrom from the city about transit. Obviously, ridership is down. He said it's part of adjusting to a new system. He also cited the reduced number of newcomers allowed into the country. I think a lot of people sort of thought, really, is that really affecting things? There were some people skeptical that was, but he acknowledged that's one of the reasons. Well, my question to you is, when do you worry? When do you go, okay, maybe this system, even though we planned it well and we researched it, doesn't work for the city of Winnipeg? When do you worry? When do you look at that?
Well, first of all, to the skeptics, respectfully, Bjorn's right. Bjorn Radstrom is right. For sure, immigration, the drop in immigration numbers, absolutely, and international students for sure is one of the reasons that the ridership has dropped. In fact, it's dropping across Canada in transit systems. However, the new system we rolled out, I believe, is the right system. I'm not pleased with the way it's rolled out. I hear from transit riders, they're frustrated. I acknowledge that. We are working now to improve the system and make adjustments as necessary, adding more late night service, early morning service, more buses to deal with some of the capacity issues in the morning. We're adding transit shelters. And so I ask riders, thank you for your patience. I acknowledge that some are frustrated and right, and fairly so. But we are making the changes. We're working to improve transit. We're working to make transit safer for everybody. We're working to make transit better for everybody.
Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
That is a Winnipeg Mayor Scott Gillingham. Still ahead after 8 o'clock, you putting red meat in the kids' lunchbox this morning? Maybe not. A whole bunch of doctors from across Canada calling on schools and hospitals to ban processed meat because of links to cancer. It's been an open letter sent. We're going to talk to a physician who signed it after 8. Also, a nutritionist will be on CBC. Let's go to Heather Wells for other news developing right now.
Good morning. Well, a man who was convicted and later acquitted in a high-profile Winnipeg murder case faces several new charges in Vancouver. Vancouver police confirm Mark Edward Grant has been charged with unlawful confinement, sexual assault with a weapon, and uttering threats related to an incident earlier this month. He was previously convicted of the 1984 murder of 13-year-old Candace Dirkson. We're going to hear from her mother in our next local news coming up at 8:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather. So as I mentioned, we are having one challenge in traffic that we just heard about. Maureen says South Perimeter both ways really slick. Saw some cars in the ditch there. If you are seeing additional problems, please contact us at 788-3093 on the commuter line. Minus 15 light snow, winds are calm. Will only be around minus 14 for the day. And we do have some blowing snow and cold warnings across parts of Manitoba. And also around the lakes regions, there's a blizzard concern, so visibility will be poor. We're going to hear more from Donald Trump and Davos coming up on national and international news. That's happening live right now. 1 minute to 8.
On cue. I'm Talia Schlenger in for Tom Power. Jodie Foster, the Oscar and Emmy-winning actor, is doing something she's never done before, taking on the lead role in a French-language film. Jodie will tell you why she feels like she has a different personality as an actor in French and about the freedom she's found after turning 60.
Suddenly was like, yeah, who cares? I didn't have to be the center of attention anymore.
Q, this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on CBC Listen, or wherever you get your podcasts. Is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
On April 22nd, 2022, Lisa Banfield escaped a violent assault by her partner. He went on to carry out Canada's deadliest mass shooting on that day. Lisa Banfield tells her own story from Halifax, coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young.
U.S. President Donald Trump is addressing the World Economic Forum.
It's great to be back in beautiful Davos, Switzerland, and to address so many respected business leaders, so many friends, few enemies.
Trump getting some laughs in Davos, Switzerland, but tensions are high with several European nations. Trump is expected to continue to push his plans to take over Greenland, and some of the leaders he is speaking to right now say they are prepared to push back. The European Parliament is now reconsidering a U.S. trade agreement reached last July. It is the latest escalation in ongoing trade tensions between the U.S. and Europe. Trump has threatened additional tariffs on several countries that oppose his plans to acquire Greenland. Trump says the U.S. is helping Venezuela and tells the forum in Davos the country will make more money off its oil reserves, but he's still promising to block all Venezuelan money and oil that was going to Cuba, and he's predicting the communist country will fall. The CBC's Lorinda Redekop has more on how some Cubans in Canada are reacting.
Hopefully, Cuba will be free this year.
Nelson Taylor Saul supports Donald Trump's comments about Cuba. He's a Cuban Canadian who's long called for changes there, refusing to visit the country for more than 20 years. Julio Fonseca has a much different view. He's been watching and worrying, given Trump's statements.
It is really dangerous, and the world should stand up and say enough is enough.
This was the U.S. president speaking to reporters 2 weeks ago.
Cuba is ready to fall.
The Americans, of course, have believed that they're about to fall and collapse into the ocean many, many times since 1959.
Mark Entwistle is with the Munk School of Global Affairs and a former Canadian ambassador to Cuba. He says despite decades of U.S. sanctions, it has survived, though he says it is increasingly difficult there with an economic downturn going back to the start of COVID. But he says the country has become less reliant on Venezuelan oil over the years.
My recommendation to policymakers in Washington is assume nothing. Don't count them down, even though they're on the mat.
All this in a country where legions of Canadians spend their vacations and make up the highest number of tourists. Recently, Ottawa issued a travel advisory warning about power outages and shortages of basic necessities. It's too early to know if this will affect tourism, the island's biggest industry. Lorinda Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
Sweden is taking a stand against the U.S. president's so-called Board of Peace. Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson told reporters this morning Sweden will not participate. Trump says the board will oversee next steps in Gaza, and he will be the chair. The proposal was initially criticized by the office of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Some of his far-right allies say Israel should take sole responsibility for Gaza's future. But Netanyahu now says he is willing to join the Board of Peace. The man who killed Japan's former prime minister has been sentenced to life behind bars. He shot Shinzo Abe in 2022 during a speech. The killer says it was revenge for Abe's perceived political ties to a controversial church. But as the CBC's Malone Mullen reports, despite his guilty plea, some see the killer as a victim.
These supporters of the man who shot Shinzo Abe to death say life in prison is too harsh a sentence, protesting outside the courtroom as Tetsuya Yamagami learned his fate. Nearly 700 people lined up for a ticket to the killer's sentencing. In spite of the late prime minister's popularity, empathy for Yamagami persists. Some observers told CBC News they hoped the judge would go easy on the killer. This woman hopes he'll be rehabilitated. Others here say Yamagami's crime was a reaction to an imbalance of power.
An instance of what I would call counter-hegemonic violence from below.
Canadian Setsu Shigematsu is a professor at the University of California. She studies political revolt and wanted a front row seat to the trial.
When we really get to the root of what causes this kind of violence against authority, there are a lot of legitimate moral reasons why people act this way. And
Abe led Japan for over 8 years. His killer testified that he targeted Abe because he believed the politician had ties to the Unification Church, a South Korean religious group known for its outsized political influence. Yamagami says the church preyed on his mother, demanding she donate the family's savings, leaving them destitute. A Japanese court dissolved the church last year. Malone Mullen, CBC News, Nara, Japan.
Spanish authorities say there has been a second fatal train crash this week, this time in the Barcelona area. One person was killed last night. The train plowed into a retaining wall that had fallen onto the tracks. More than 30 people have been injured. Commuter train service in the area is suspended. This crash happened while Spain is in 3 days of mourning. On Sunday, a high-speed collision in the south of Spain killed more than 40 people. The spouse of the deadliest mass shooter in Canadian history is sharing her story. The gunman disguised himself as an RCMP officer and went on a rampage in Nova Scotia. As the CBC's Kayla Hounsell reports, now 6 years later, she's revealing more about how she lived with intimate partner violence.
Things that happen behind closed doors need to be told.
For 19 years, Lisa Banfield stayed silent about life with the man who would become the worst mass shooter in modern Canadian history. Not anymore. She says for much of their time together, Gabriel Wortman abused her.
And Gabriel threatened my family, so I couldn't leave.
In April 2020, Wortman went on a rampage, masquerading as an RCMP officer with a replica police car, killing 22 people, including a pregnant woman. It began with an attack on Banfield. Now she's telling her story of intimate partner violence in a book and to the Current's Matt Galloway. But the families of those murdered are still grieving, and many are angry about Banfield's book.
It's brought on a lot of trauma.
Tammy Oliver McCurdy lost her sister, Jolene Oliver, brother-in-law, Aaron Tuck, and 17-year-old niece, Emily.
It's about that she's making money off the backs of our deceased family members.
The RCMP originally charged Banfield with providing ammunition. The charge was withdrawn after she completed a restorative justice program. The public inquiry examining the mass shooting was clear. Banfield is a victim and was re-victimized by the RCMP.
People are going to say whatever they want about me, but if I could help one person, I can take that.
Banfield says she lives with survivor's guilt and is still in therapy, but also finding her voice. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Halifax.
You can hear that complete interview with Lisa Banfield this morning at 8:37 on The Current. About 2,800 kids in Yukon count on a yellow bus to get them to school every day. But their parents say the school bus service is anything but reliable. There's a shortage of drivers, frequent cancellations, and as Isabella Calisi tells us, it's causing some parents to miss work.
We get these last-minute notifications that there's no bus.
Melissa Arkwell says her daughter's school bus has been canceled about 2 to 3 times a week since school began this year. That's a big issue for Arkwell, who lives a 40-minute drive from her daughter's school in Whitehorse. After she's dropped off, Arkwell then has to turn around and drive to work, an hour's drive away. The bus company, Standard Bus, operates in the Yukon and British Columbia. Yukon Minister of Education, Scott Kent, says the company has brought drivers from outside the territory to help with demand, and the government is trying to help with recruitment.
Kids need to be in school, and many kids rely on school buses to get them there.
In the meantime, parents are still being subjected to frequent cancellations. CBC has reached out to Standard Bus for an interview, but has not received a confirmation for one. Isabella Calisi, CBC News, Whitehorse.
Returning now to our top story, U.S. President Donald Trump's speech to world leaders in Davos. Just minutes ago, he spoke about Greenland.
I have tremendous respect for both the people of Greenland and the people of Denmark. Tremendous respect. But every NATO ally has an obligation to be able to defend their own territory. And the fact is, no nation or group of nations is in any position to be able to secure Greenland other than the United States.
Trump says Greenland is sitting undefended in a key strategic location. He described that location as being between the United States, China, and Russia. He repeated again, the United States needs it for national security reasons. That is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, as the world leans in to continue listening to U.S. President Donald Trump and what he is saying, especially now that he's turned his address in Davos to Greenland, we're actually going to take you to some key parts of what he's saying right now in a moment. Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and YouTube, in a cold downtown Winnipeg from our CBC studios. Thanks so much for making us part of your day. Well, maybe your day started early, stuff in the lunchbox. What did you put in it? We're going to hear in this half hour some concerns that are coming from physicians about red meat. Physicians across the country calling for processed meats specifically, like bacon, hot dogs, deli meats, to be removed from school and hospital menus. We're going to talk to one of several physicians in this country who've penned an open letter to Health Canada and federal and provincial ministers to have changes. Also, staying with that story, we have a child nutritionist from the Child Nutrition Council of Manitoba who's going to talk more about this, so stay with us. Right now, let's go to Heather Wells for local news headlines, and then we're going to take you back to Davos to hear more from U.S. President Donald Trump. Heather, what's developing in our province?
Well, we're hearing about some charges laid in Vancouver that have a Manitoba connection, so much so it's stirring up a painful mix of emotions for one Winnipeg family. A man convicted and then later acquitted in the murder of Candace Dirkson, a Winnipeg teenager in 1984, has now been charged in Vancouver. BC's prosecution service says Mark Edward Grant has been charged with unlawful confinement, sexual assault with a weapon, and uttering threats. Now, Grant was convicted in the murder of Candace Dirkson, but was later acquitted of that crime. We're going to hear from Candace's mom coming up. And as the temperature drops into the low -20s this week, people living and working in a 3-story complex in Wolseley are preparing for even more discomfort. The building at 875 Westminster has been without proper heat since early January. We'll hear from one tenant coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Well, we're going to plug into weather and traffic in literally 1 minute, but we've pulled a critical minute from U.S. President Donald Trump's current address that's going on live right now in Davos, Switzerland. He, of course, there as world leaders are meeting for the annual World Economic Forum. People have been leaning in for these moments, so we're waiting to hear if he's going to say anything about Canada after Prime Minister Mark Carney gave an address yesterday and quite a speech yesterday. Also, we have just started to hear the U.S. president talk about Greenland at 8 o'clock. So we got a little bit on World Report. But one of the things he said was after, in his words, the U.S. gave Greenland back to Denmark after World War II. Look how, quote, ungrateful they are now. He also was talking about the land masses as barely land and more of a big piece of ice. Here is what the U.S. president, though, has said about why he continues to say that the U.S. needs Greenland.
It's the United States alone that can protect this giant mass of land, this giant piece of ice, develop it and improve it and make it so that it's good for Europe and safe for Europe and good for us. And that's the reason I'm seeking immediate negotiations to once again discuss the acquisition of Greenland by the United States, just as we have acquired many other territories throughout our history, as many of the European nations have. They've acquired, there's nothing wrong with it. Many of them, some went in reverse, actually, if you look. Some had great, vast wealth, great, vast lands all over the world. They went in reverse. They're stuck back where they started. That happens too. But some grow. But this would not be a threat to NATO. This would greatly enhance the security of the entire alliance, the NATO alliance. The United States is treated very unfairly by NATO. I want to tell you that.
Trump has just said he will not use force to acquire Greenland, but is asking to acquire it. So live coverage right now on CBC Newsnet and, of course, analysis through the day. Right now, 8:14. As I mentioned, we're going to return now to what's happening in our lives here in Manitoba and in Canada. And it is classically cold out there for January, Abby. It's just today's not as cold as it's going to be the next couple of days. But what are our temps right now?
Yeah, we're tracking that cold front that's going to be surging through the province starting from today all the way into the weekend for some regions. We're already seeing the blowing snow advisory and even blizzard warnings for parts of southern Manitoba and towards the lakes. We're expecting those winds from the northwest to really pick up speed up to 80 kilometers per hour. It's going to be creating near zero visibilities from sometime in the afternoon for folks in that area, impacting the Red River, the Pembina Valley, the Lake Winnipeg North Basin. And these dangerous conditions will stay through the afternoon. So take it easy as you prepare to head home after work. Then we have the orange warning for folks around Lean Lake, Brochet to Dilly Lake. We're looking at a multi-day freeze with life-threatening wind chills between minus 45 this morning already, and then it's even going to get to minus 50 for folks in that part of the province later tonight. So also a risk of frostbite will develop in minutes and exposed skin. Take it easy out there. In Winnipeg right now, we're seeing temperatures hover between minus 15 and minus 20 at the airport, and we will stay around that range for most of the day. A good chance of flurries would start sometime this morning, and then it's going to pick up speed later in the afternoon. We'll see wind chills in the city around minus 31 this morning.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Well, Donald Trump, and I apologize because obviously we do have one eye on this speech, as many in the world do. He has just started making comments about Canada. The only one I'll share right now is that he has said Canada should be grateful to us, but they aren't. And so, as I mentioned, more analysis. We do have to stay here in Winnipeg, though, for traffic as well. Corey, you're getting calls this morning about all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, Kathy called with two things, actually, update folks. Maysville will be a minivan southbound Main just before Inkster in the middle lane. It had its four ways on, so keep left or right to get around that with some backups for building when she called about that. She also said westbound Logan at Gunnell, that's just before Sherbrooke there. In the curb lane, there's been a collision there as well, so keep left to get around that. South Perimeter Super Slick, says Maureen, saw a few cars in the ditch. Actually, that's going both ways.
And we also got a call from Chris just now saying South Perimeter westbound south of St. Anne's Road is a parking lot, is the description now. So yeah, really slow there.
Okay.
And maybe good because it's slippery.
Yeah, you may want to just avoid South Perimeter if you can. If you do see anything else going on out there, you can give me a call on the CBC commuter line, 204-788-3093.
All right, let's talk about lunch. You might have packed a bologna sandwich or two for your kids' school lunch before, or maybe some deli meat and crackers this morning. It might seem harmless, but there's growing calls now, as I mentioned, to remove processed meat from school and hospital menus in this country. An open letter signed by doctors and other health professionals has been sent to Health Canada and provincial ministers of health and education. It details the harms of processed meat, which include deli meats, all of which have been classified as Group 1 carcinogens since 2015, according to the WHO, the World Health Organization. So this group's calling for processed meat to be removed from schools and publicly funded hospitals, as I mentioned, and replaced with more nutritious meals. Dr. Zara Kassam is with us, radiation oncologist over at the Stronach Regional Cancer Centre in Newmarket, Ontario. She's one of the physicians that signed this open letter Monday, and she's been patiently waiting on Zoom. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you for highlighting our initiative.
Why did you sign this? What concerns you the most?
I'm an oncologist. I have worked for the last 25 years, specifically with patients with cancer, and I'm seeing increasing rates of colorectal cancer in my clinic, and this is reflected in the evidence. And it's really been, as you said, over 10 years that the World Health Organization has designated processed meats as a Group 1 carcinogen, meaning that the strength of evidence is such that we know that processed meat causes bowel cancer. And even in small amounts, we see, for example, a hot dog a day or less than 2 slices of bacon a day will increase your risk of bowel cancer by 18%. And red meat has also been classed as a probable carcinogen to humans as well in the causation of bowel cancer. And we know that cancer is our number 1 cause of death. We know that colorectal cancer is increasing in our under 50 population. So we, as a group, myself representing 164 healthcare professionals, really want to put evidence into practice and are asking ministers in Health Canada to ask for a phasing out and a complete removal of processed meats from all our public institutions, such as schools, such as hospitals, such as long-term care homes and shelters, where we serve the most vulnerable of our populations, our children, our sick, and our elders.
I have to be careful because I actually said red meat. I misspoke and didn't say it. This is not about red meat. This is about processed meat. Correct? Red meat does not carry the same risk?
That's correct. So this letter is very specifically about removing processed meat, the group 1 carcinogen. Red meat has been classed as a probable carcinogen, a group 2A, and red meat also is linked to poorer health outcomes, but we specifically have focused on processed meat, which has the greatest strength of evidence.
You mentioned some of the amounts. You said a hot dog a day, but I mean, tell me a little bit more about the concerning amounts and what's your understanding of if it's so bad for us, why there hasn't been a real push to remove these processed meats before from schools and hospitals?
I would say that there's probably no safe level. You know, we quote this statistic, but there is no safe level. I think in many situations, it takes a while for policy to catch up with evidence. We saw similar in smoking. We remember it took many years for us to catch up with that data, and even doctors were recommending smoking. We smoke Camels. So it's a similar situation. I think it's just very common for policy to catch up, but after a decade, it really is time. And we have a precedent now. New York City has actually banned processed meat from their public institutions. And we're also in a time where people are really looking to improve their health by improving healthy food choices. And specifically, we're in January, the month of Veganuary, where millions of people actually sign on to choose healthier foods. So there's many reasons that now is the time, but it is a long time coming. And we should, we believe, have a national campaign educating people on the harms of processed meat, because the surveys tell us that people don't actually know about that, and I certainly see that daily in my clinic.
Just as a last question, if I may interject, Shared Health here locally says hospitals are already serving sandwiches here that have no more than 10 grams of fat and no more than 960 milligrams of sodium. So is that not enough in the context of the conversation?
There are many institutions that have made great strides in providing nutritious foods, but I and my group feel that there is no place at all for processed meat in our public institutions, which should be reflecting the best evidence, and they should be beacons and examples of good health. As we said, there is no safe level. There is great harms from processed meat, any processed meat. We certainly shouldn't be serving it to our children in any amount or anybody.
Thank you very much for talking with us with your perspective, Doctor. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
That is Dr. Zara Kassam, a radiation oncologist at the Stronach Regional Cancer Centre in Newmarket, Ontario. Now, I mentioned Shared Health. Pardon me, CBC to reach out to Shared Health. It currently follows healthy eating guidelines across all healthcare sites, including cafeterias and other food service operations. Now, as for the use of processed meats, it says there's targets in place to ensure meats and sandwiches and wraps, and continues to have, as mentioned, no more than 10 grams of fat, no more than 960 milligrams of sodium. We also reached out to the province. In a statement from Manitoba Health Minister Uzoma Asagwara, they say, we recognize, this is a quote, we recognize that access to nutritious food is a fundamental way to improve health outcomes, particularly for children and people receiving care in public institutions. That understanding is at the heart of our government's approach to health, including the rollout of Manitoba's Universal School Nutrition Program, which is already helping ensure students have consistent access to healthy meals and snacks. Next, though, we wanted to have another local voice weigh in on this. So let's turn to someone who says that lunch programs in Manitoba are already doing a great job at serving balanced meals. Dylan McKay is an associate professor of nutrition and chronic disease over at the University of Manitoba. He's a board member of the Child Nutrition Council of Manitoba, and he's been listening in and with us via Zoom. Good morning.
Good morning.
What do you think of what you just heard? The doctor that signed on to this letter, as many others have, saying there's no safe level of processed meats for our kids and for anyone.
So, I mean, unfortunately, I would have to say that I do not agree with her statement, and I don't think she can really say that there's no safe level for processed meats. I think that, unfortunately, the language where you describe a food like, deli meats, which are a wide category of foods lumped together, in the same breath that we talk about the risk of smoking is unfortunately not very effective messaging. It's by design trying to scare people, I think. And then saying that there is no safe level, the evidence doesn't suggest that. We know that there is an association between deli meat intake and certain cancer risks, but that's an association. It's not causation. And when you think about an association, you also have to think about the effect size. So the effect size for something like smoking is very large, whereas the effect size that's been estimated for something like deli meat is much smaller. As an example, obviously, if you took 100 people who didn't smoke, you might have 1 case of lung cancer. If you had 100 smokers, you might have 20. That is a huge increase in the amount of risk. But if you took something like 100 people who didn't eat any deli meat at all, you'd still have some cases of colon cancer, let's say 5 or 6. And then if you had people who were eating this 50 grams of deli meat every day, the evidence suggests that you might have 6 or 7 of those 100 that get colon cancer. So, I think making sure that messaging is appropriate with the amount of risk is very important, because I think everyone agrees that we want to have very healthy meals served in hospitals and schools. And at least in Manitoba, we have really good guidelines for what those meals should look like, at least in the schools.
And I'm going to ask you specifically about that in just a moment as it pertains to processed meats. But I do want to push back a little bit, only because, you're saying that you disagree with her. So there's obviously competing evidence. You're both citing different sources. We do know, though, that to her comparison about, is it a carcinogen, about smoking, and you drew your example. But it has been classified, bacon, ham, sausages, hot dog, deli meat as a Group 1 carcinogen by the World Health Organization, as I mentioned, since 2015. So I guess that's what's led them to look at this. What evidence would you need to see to worry, I guess, is the question. Because obviously, it seems like on both sides there's concern, and I can hear that you understand that there's a concern there, but you feel they're taking it too far. So I'm wondering where your level of worry, where that lies.
I'm not disputing that there's the link. It's about how strong that effect of the link is, right? On that list as well, the same level one list, things like wood dust, air pollution, salted fish, they all end up in that 1A, category as well. But it's about the magnitude of effect.
It's the causation link and how direct it is.
Well, and then not all of these are causal; they're just associations. So I think that saying things like you can't feed your children any amount of deli meat is a little more inflammatory and meant to scare, because I think this letter that they have is we want to get people thinking about healthier meals. But I don't know if that's the right approach for it.
News coming up in 3 minutes, so I need to get to the policy you mentioned. It's important. So what do the 2014 Manitoba guidelines on school meals say about processed meats?
I think there's restrictions on it, right? The 2014 guidelines, although they're a little old now, they still were based on very good evidence about what we know is healthy, variety, focusing on whole foods, lots of fruits and vegetables. And I think they had, let's say, guidelines that said that they shouldn't be served more than twice a month. So, you're really offering lots of alternatives. And I know that many people are working in the schools and in the hospitals in Manitoba to try to offer varieties, adapt meal plans for our cultural tastes, and maintaining a high standard of nutrition, which is really a big focus of the school meal programs. And so when you're coming up with things that you want to say ban, I think those policies are hard to implement. Some people react negatively to them. And I prefer a focus where we talk about what we know is healthy, right? We can reduce cancer risks by eating more fruits and vegetables. We can reduce cancer risks by meeting physical activity guidelines, having cleaner air. And some of those things from a policy perspective can be implemented more easily, perhaps, than how would we enforce a deli meat ban? Does that mean someone inspects the lunches that I pack, or that someone gives their children to take there? Whereas we can... we don't have any mechanisms to enforce those.
Really appreciate your perspective, Dylan McKay. Thank you very much for being with us.
No, thanks for the opportunity.
So that's lots to think about, right, for our last two guests as you're thinking about your own family and thinking about the context of this story. Dylan McKay has been with us, Associate Professor of Nutrition and Chronic Disease at the University of Manitoba, Board Member for the Child Nutrition Council of Manitoba. CBC did reach out to school divisions about their lunch programs. Both the Louis Riel School Division and the Winnipeg School Division did not respond to our request for comment. We're coming up to news time at 8:30 here. Thanks for being with us on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on that app and on YouTube. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team here at the show. We just want to mention before news here that the South Perimeter is a problem. We've had a couple of calls this morning about it being around St. Anne's, like a parking lot, about it being very slippery. Earlier this morning, we had some people in the ditch. So just take it easy if you're on the perimeter ring. Within the city of Winnipeg as well, some icy spots also. Kathy called saying southbound Main before Inkster, a stalled minivan. It had its four ways in the middle lane. Backups were building. Now, that was around 8. That could be clear by now. 788-3093 if you need us. Your news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it is minus 15 in downtown Winnipeg. Our temperature is going to stick pretty close to that through the day, but the wind picks up, creating blowing snow and also a risk of frostbite and getting very cold overnight tonight. Well, with the U.S. relationship with Europe and NATO hanging in the balance, U.S. President Donald Trump is addressing the World Economic Forum right now in Davos, Switzerland. For nearly 12 minutes, Trump makes the case for why the United States needs Greenland, which he calls a giant piece of ice, for security. Trump also talking about Canada moments ago, saying the U.S. defends Canada.
Canada gets a lot of freebies from us, by the way. They should be grateful also, but they're not. I watched your prime minister yesterday. He wasn't so grateful. But they should be grateful to us. Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements.
Yesterday, Mark Carney telling the forum middle powers like Canada need to recognize the world has fundamentally changed. Carney says if middle powers don't work together, if they're not at the table, he says they will be on the menu. You can read more on this story at cbcnews.ca. A man who was convicted and later acquitted in a high-profile Winnipeg murder case faces new charges in Vancouver. British Columbia's prosecution service says Mark Edward Grant has been charged with unlawful confinement, sexual assault with a weapon, and uttering threats. He was previously convicted in the 1984 murder of 13-year-old Candace Dirkson. That conviction in 2011. Then he was acquitted later of that crime. Candace's mother, Wilma Dirkson, says she found out about Grant's new charges yesterday, just days after the anniversary of her daughter's death, and that stirred up a painful mix of emotions.
I guess living it a bit again and feeling the pain of the victim and the parents of the victim and the family of the victim.
Dirkson hopes the alleged victim in Vancouver receives an outpouring of support. Grant is expected to appear in a BC court later this month for a possible bail hearing. Well, as temperatures drop into the low minus 20s this week, people who live and work in a 3-story complex in Wolseley are preparing for more discomfort. That building at 875 Westminster has been without proper heat since early January. Raina Enns lives there and says she is fed up with the situation and has started staying at a hotel.
Anytime I've reached out for an update directly to somebody, it's either been, I'll get back to you tomorrow and I hear nothing, or it's just a generic, we're working on it. So they're not doing what they need to, and they forget that we're human beings sitting in here freezing.
In a statement, Thorwin Properties says the boiler had to be shut off because of carbon monoxide levels. The company says it's working on permanent repairs and in the meantime has provided tenants with heaters. A prominent physician who worked to improve health outcomes for Indigenous people has died. Dr. Barry Lavali is being remembered for his work not only as a physician but also as an advocate. In a statement, Kiwetanuk Inanu Miniyawen says Lavali died unexpectedly. The 64-year-old had been CEO there since 2020. The organization supports health care in Northern First Nations. Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs Grand Chief Kyra Wilson says Lavali worked to end disparities between Indigenous and non-Indigenous people.
It's passion that really makes a strong advocate, and he was very passionate about our people and health when it comes to First Nations.
Lavali often spoke about issues surrounding racism in healthcare. Manitoba is returning to the private nursing agencies it cut loose just days ago. The province is temporarily allowing some healthcare facilities to once again ask these agencies for help filling nursing shifts. Just last week, Manitoba cut ties with dozens of agencies. It's trying to make private nursing less appealing and to push more staff to the public system. PC health critic Kathleen Cook says the transition could have been smoother had the province reduced the number of private agencies gradually.
They could have focused on eliminating those vacancies, on filling those vacancies in Prairie Mountain Health before they essentially handcuffed the RHA and took the agency option away from them.
Manitoba's health minister says they are still committed to transitioning from nearly 80 agencies to just 4. Costs have skyrocketed from $26 million a year to $80 million in just 4 years. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
Thanks to our news department, Heather Wells, Megan Ketcherson, and Joni Nicolo, as well as our producers, Nellie Gonzalez and Leif Larson. Also, thanks to our live team in Studio 15, Corey Funk and Abby Adiyemi, and Darren Marash, who's our producer of YouTube, and associate producers with work in our program today, Jenna Badasso and Sophia Peralta Barone. Thank you, everybody, for all of your hard work today and every day. We are ending with some slippery spots and some slow spots. So Corey's popped in with a final look at your morning commute.
Yes, South Perimeter, very, very slippery. Even heard about a very slow situation around St. Anne's Road. So careful there. So heard from someone who saw some cars in the ditch. Also westbound Logan at Gunnell just before Sherbrooke, collision in the curb lane, as well as southbound Main Street. May still be a stalled car just before Inkster in the middle lane.
All right. Thanks, Corey.
Thank you.
Abby.
Snow to the south, cold to the north. We're seeing cold chills around -45, and later tonight it feels like -50 up north, and down south it's going to be near zero visibility as you commute home later today. So take it easy. Winnipeg, we've been around -16 all morning. We're going to fall, and then temperature stays within the mid-teens, and those windy conditions will be picking up later in the day. So around your drive home, take that into consideration. It might get tricky.
All right. Thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the show this morning for this Wednesday, January 21st. This has been Information Radio on CBC. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Take care, everybody. Have a great rest of your day in our beautiful province. Stay warm, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow right here on CBC's Information Radio. The Currents coming up next on 89.3.